Huh? Tristan hummed. Do you like the idea of marriage? Iris asked innocently. Before I found out about, he clamped his jaw shut, not wanting to curse in front of Iris. Go ahead, I know what you're about to say, the title fits perfectly, Iris said, reaching over and gently placing her hand on his arm. The bitch, yeah. I thought I had a loving marriage. Then I hated going home. You don't know the willpower it took to not trip on the stairs and strangle her with my bare hands. But that bitch and whoever she was screwing weren't worth a life sentence for me. Would it have been sweet? Sure, but that's temporary. I knew the cops would find me if that happened. She might have wasted 12 years of my life. I wasn't going to let her have the next 60. So, would you do it again? Iris asked, hoping he wasn't overthinking it too much. I don't know. Depends on how I feel and who I'm with if it happens to me, Tristan shrugged. I hope you don't shut yourself off from the possibility. Not all women are like your ex-wife. You are divorcing her, right? For now, no. I want her to sweat when the bills start piling up and she can't keep herself in those fancy clothes she loves. And when she looks and can't find me, I'll laugh my ass off. Tristan chuckled. So, what are you going to do? Make sure she doesn't get a dime from me. She'll have to file for abandonment. Since I gave her the house, that will keep the sharks away from coming after me. Then, who knows, maybe treat myself to a nice vacation. Hear single guys do that well, Tristan said, unsure why Iris seemed uncomfortable with his answer. Tristan didn't know where all that came from, and he wasn't going to ask. He was about to be her boss, and though he found her incredibly attractive, he wasn't going to be one of those guys who sleeps with their assistant unless she made the first move. He didn't want the gossip mill churning about him being a womanizer or that he pressured Iris. He wanted her reputation to stay untarnished because of him, so he drove in silence. Hey, Mom, Ariel said, answering her phone as she sat at her desk as Mark's PR manager. How are my girls doing? They are fine. What will Tristan think when they are not home when he arrives home? Mom, you know Tristan doesn't get home until 8 p.m. on weekdays. He's the one who wants to stay away from us, and honestly I want him to. He scared me a little 2 weeks ago. I've never seen him that angry. If I didn't know better, I'd say he wouldn't have a problem doing what he threatened. I hope the forced vacation helps him somewhat. So he still hasn't accepted the situation. No, I told you he never would. I tried to get him into bed 2 weeks ago. Just the thought of sleeping with me made him nauseous. I figured when I fixed this, I'd be able to keep my husband and my son. But in 5 years, that still hasn't happened. I think it's not worth it. What are you talking about? You got Mark under your thumb. I told you his wife was a cold bitch. She knows everything about you from the first time you and he slept together. What did she do? Absolutely nothing. Ariel didn't know whether to laugh when her mother chuckled. She knew her father kicked her out of the house for her bad actions as a wife. But neither knew that Mark's wife was like Tristan, waiting for the perfect moment to ruin them when they least expected it and would hurt them the most. Do you want me to talk to Tristan? I don't mind putting that man in his place. Mom, Tristan is more likely to duct tape you to the wall and use a potato gun to shoot sharp objects at you than listen to you, Ariel said honestly. Let me handle Tristan. He may hate me because he certainly doesn't love me, but I know how to talk to him and keep his temper in check. He's not like that, is he? Mark asked. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but he needed to review the photo shoot happening in 2 days for a soon-to-be-open children's hospital. I gotta go, Mom. I'll call you later. Bye, Mark. Yeah. I'm starting to think Tristan is becoming that kind of man, Ariel said sadly. While she might want to eat cake and eat it too, she loved Tristan less after the past 5 years. Yet, she still hoped she could keep Tristan in the dark and live her life like her mother did in the 70s. She thought there could still be a chance for them if she could get him to sleep with her. However, as Tristan choked on the thought, she knew their marriage died long ago, and even God's hand could not bring it back to life. And then I'll stay away from him. But I need you to keep an eye on this, make sure everything is all right. I can't have anything bad happening, not now, not when the dink has its eye on me, Mark said smugly. Oh. Ariel leaned forward, her interest piqued. She knew he was considering running for president, but she didn't know the dink was considering him for it. Sure, Mark, you know I'll make sure that makes you shine like a star. I know, you're always trustworthy since he's usually not home until late. How about we have dinner tonight? I'd love to, Mark, but Lucia has her recital tonight. I told you about that on Saturday. Right, you did. With all of this, it's getting confusing, forgive me, Mark asked, sounding charming. I understand this is big news, honey, Ariel said, smiling at him. I'll make it up to you. We don't want anyone questioning why a state senator is at an elementary school recital. I know Lucia will play her heart out if she knows it's for her papa, she said sweetly. She knew if he got to the White House, he'd bring his staff with him. That meant she'd be gone. And maybe Tristan could find some peace without her in his life. She would even give him the house and a small alimony. She just regretted hurting him so much and destroying what she thought was a great marriage. It was 3:30 in the afternoon when she drove into her driveway. Her daughters giggled as they skipped towards the door, their backpacks bumping against their backs as they did so. As she walked up the steps to her house, pulling out her keys as she did, she noticed the strange attention from her neighbors, pondering what made them so fascinated about her home. Ariel listened as the locks clicked into place as she turned the deadbolt. Her daughters rushed past her after she got the door unlocked, not hearing the metallic clang on the floor in the rush of her daughters. She was in the middle of retrieving the mail, flipping through it as she stood up. It was Isabella's words that made Ariel quickly look up. What did you say? Ariel asked, sure she misheard her eldest daughter. I wasn't Dad the one who left the door open. Can't we get in? Isabella asked with mischief in her eyes. No, you know better than that. You want Tristan to be mad at you, Ariel said as she looked down at her daughter, noticing Isabella's face pale before quickly shaking her head. Good, now go upstairs and get ready for Lucia's recital. We'll be leaving in an hour. A warm smile graced her lips as she watched her daughters race upstairs to their bedrooms. Her mind drifted back to the early years of her marriage and how good Tristan had been to her children before the truth was revealed. She didn't know how he found out, not that it mattered anymore. She knew if they could get through the next 2 years, then Tristan would be free of her. She knew there was no way Mark would lose the election. Not when she made sure his image remained squeaky clean. Her heels clicked on the floor as she strolled to Tristan's bedroom. The letter fell from her hand as she stared at an empty room. A wave of sadness washed over her. She knew he was gone for good. Her thumb gently brushed against her wedding ring as the good years flashed back. After getting the mail, she logged onto her banking app, making sure she could pay the bills because she suspected Tristan had paid for her that month. She knew it was going to be tight. She might have to sell the house. She didn't know if she could do that without his signature. As she put her wallet on the kitchen counter, that's when she saw the envelope with her name on it handwritten by Tristan. She didn't know why her heart sank. Tristan had been very clear about how he felt about her. At first, she thought he was enjoying himself because he hadn't divorced her after finding out, only to find out he just didn't want to give her half his money. Sighing, she opened her wallet and took out Tristan's letter. To whom it may concern. Her rage flared as he couldn't even address her in the letter. Dear John, I'm leaving as of this day, January 14th. Now you're done. Bitch, you can have the house. I don't want it anymore. It's worth more than what we have, so you won't get anything else from me. Good luck with paying the bills. I wonder what that old dude Mark is going to do when his little bitch can't come that night. The good news is you only have to wait 1 year to file for abandonment. Don't try to find me, you won't, don't call. There's nothing to say to a two-faced, lying bitch that I thought was a sweet girl I met in high school. I have one question. Were you a bitch like this back then? But then again, I don't care anymore. I hope you have a miserable life, and every man from now on has a terrible time with your life. Good riddance, and go fuck yourself. She frowned as she dialed Tristan's office number. Hello, this is Peter Strong. How may I help you? You're not my husband. Where's Tristan? Get him on the phone now, Ariel demanded. Ma'am, are you sure you're all right? A wife doesn't know her husband no longer works in this office? What? No, since when? I can't discuss personal information. I don't know where he's gone. I've been in this position for the past 2 weeks, Peter lied. He knew where. He was just returning a favor to his friend for setting up his replacement. Oh, thanks, sorry to bother you, Ariel apologized, putting the phone to her ear as she called Tristan's mobile, only to go straight to voicemail. She tried 4 more times before realizing he'd blocked her number. Isabella, she yelled to her eldest. Yes? Isabella's small feet hurried to the first step of the stairs. Get Mom's phone isn't working, Ariel lied, blowing her daughter a kiss as Isabella ran to her room. Thank you, sweetie. I won't hog it. Tristan might have blocked her. She knew he didn't do that to Isabella since she never called Tristan on it. She paced the kitchen as she heard the ring before hearing the click of a connection. Hello? Why did it sound like someone was singing, and whose voice sounded so much like a woman? Tristan, don't hang up. Why would you call me, borrowing anyone's phone just to talk to me? I'd rather get rid of you right now than deal with your annoyance. What do you want? Is this how you end things? Bitch, you ended our marriage 8 months after you first slept with that asshole. Get to the point of the call, or I'm throwing this phone out the window. Where are you going? Ariel bit her lip, hearing a ha from him. Tell me why I should tell you this damn thing? Tris, I know this isn't what I hoped for, but I'm really sorry. Forget it, you want forgiveness. Tell God I'm not giving it to you. Tristan looked at Iris as she pulled into a rest stop while he was on the phone with his ex-wife. Beau, who are you talking to? Confusion etched across his face as he looked at Iris as her southern drawl washed over him like a wave of unrestrained desire and need, clearly catching Tristan off guard as his mind caught up. You know I told you it was over with her. His Adam's apple bobbed violently as Iris half leaned, half crawled across his car's console. I told you I don't share you, Iris purred, not missing the effect her voice had on a certain part of him. All of this is just for me. Her deep growl overpowered the voice he heard coming from his phone as her face was inches from his. JJ. Tristan's voice caught in his throat as he let out a deep groan as Iris gripped his shaft through his pants. He felt the phone slip from his hand as he couldn't escape the intense gaze in her eyes. Hey, Sug, he's mine now, you got what you needed. So I'm ending this so I can give him what only a real woman can. Iris said seductively as her eyes trailed down his chest before ending the call, placing it in the cup holder before settling back into her seat. Too much? She asked with a mischievous grin. Can you look away for a sec? Tristan stammered as his erection strained against his pants. Why? So you can readjust your boner. Iris bit her lip as she pointed at it. She acknowledged what she felt really, really good. How could you do that? Tristan asked as he shifted his shaft to a less painful position. I mean, talkin' without your accent, he explained as she looked at him with suspicion. Oh, Northerners, at least the ones I've met, tend to take my accent to mean I'm an inbred country bumpkin. So I learned to speak without it, but now, this is how I'll talk. Can you handle it? Iris asked with a shy smile as she drove out of the truck stop they were in and back onto the road. Earplugs, I see earplugs in my future. I'll be like Odysseus when he tied himself to the mast of his ship when he passed the sirens, Tristan joked. Oh? I'm a siren, am I? Him. Interesting, Iris said, laughing as she saw Tristan blush. She found it adorable that she could do that to a man 7 years older than her. Though she couldn't explain why she did all that, specifically grabbing his shaft. She noticed a slight possessiveness creeping in whenever he spoke of other women or, she hoped, his soon-to-be ex-wife. She just needed to figure out the meaning behind it as she saw the detour exit sign their GPS was leading them to because of an accident 10 miles south of them. Hey, thanks for helping me get the clothes up, Iris said as they rode the elevator to the 4th floor. No problem, glad we got there in time to catch the movers before they left the storage unit I rented. I think you might like this place. I don't know about the pool, but I assume it's nice when summer comes. So tell me, how bad is summer here? Tristan asked as he used the box to hide his erection. He couldn't help it. For some odd reason, every time he heard her voice, his little soldier would stand up and salute. Hot and humid. Sometimes it's so hot and humid it can weigh you down 20 pounds, and you sweat like you're taking a shower in 5 minutes. Oh, it's great being back in the South, Iris sighed, taking a deep breath of the fresh Tennessee air. Means I have to go shopping for summer suits, Tristan mumbled to himself. Hey, if you want, I'm more than happy to come along. You get excited at the mere mention of the word shopping, don't you? Tristan chuckled at the bright, knowing smile on her lips. As Iris put the last of her boxes down from Tristan's truck, a sudden surreal feeling washed over her. However, it was quickly extinguished as quickly as it roared. She was a bit scared of starting over on her own, but she knew if she got into trouble, her father would be quick to come to her rescue. She heard the jingle of keys from behind, making her look behind her. What's this? Iris asked, looking strangely at his outstretched hand. Since you need a car, and the company gave me a new one, I figured I could help. I only have $3,000 left on the car payment. You secure the car, no strings attached, Tristan said, watching how she assessed the honesty in his words, as her eyes darted from his hand to his face. You mean I don't have to sleep with you for this? Do I look like that kind of guy to you? Tristan asked seriously. Not anymore, I guess, Iris mumbled. Thanks, Tristan, that takes the pressure off. And don't get me wrong, I was going to miss out just for the heated seats. So what kind of car did the company give you? Oh, I picked the one they just cut a check for. It's the beam I parked next to, Tristan said. Goosebumps raced across his skin as he touched her soft fingertips as she pulled the keys out of the car. Oh, you're driving us to work tomorrow, how nice, Iris said with a bright smile on her face. Okay, I'll leave you alone so you can unpack. I'll take a little nap if you're hungry, about 3 more hours, Tristan said, checking his phone so he could sleep tonight and not have to drag himself to the company tomorrow. Okay, I need to see what I need to buy after I unpack, Iris said, waving goodbye as he headed towards the door. Hey Mom, Iris said loudly so her mother could hear through the speakerphone while she put her clothes away. Hey sweetie, you're all settled in? Yeah, putting clothes away while we talk. So your dad told me you needed a car. What do you think about that? Oh, it's done. I'm buying Tristan's car back since the company gave him one. How much? $3,000 for a newer model Audi. I think I lucked out, Iris said, explaining what happened on their drive. I think, well, now you can come home whenever you want, and I was a bit worried about you being alone in that city without transportation. You'll introduce your dad and me to this friend of yours when we come to visit next week, okay? I guess if he wants, I'll have to see what he's doing next week. I don't know when he'll be moving into his condo. Still, we want to meet the man who brought our daughter Dadawa. Mom. Iris groaned but still had a smile on her face hearing the love in her mother's voice. What? Can't a mother be happy that her daughter is home? No, I didn't say that. I miss you too, Iris said, feeling her face flush as she took off the last of her clothes. Are you all set with everything you need? Not yet. Unpacking to check. But since that's done, I'm going to take a walk around and see what I need to get from the store, Iris said, walking into the kitchen. As she walked around her new kitchen, seeing what she needed to get, sending silent thanks to whoever was above as she noticed the plates, pots, and pans. While she still needed to buy some things for her apartment, she could at least put it off until she found her own place. Mom, gotta go. It might be him now, she said as she heard a knock at the door. Okay, be safe, get some rest, you have a great day tomorrow. Iris only shook her head at her mother's words. The love her mother had for her was unmistakable. When she opened the door, she didn't expect to see her sister Summer and her husband Maxim standing there. Iris squealed with delight as she jumped in place, throwing her arms wide to her sister. They hugged for a few minutes before greeting Maxim. What are you two doing here? Iris asked, welcoming them into her apartment. Oh, Dad called to tell me he's coming home. Since he hasn't been home in 5 years, we didn't bring our luggage after our last stop, so we could be here today. No way I'm leaving you here alone on your first day, Summer said, reassessing her sister's new temporary living quarters. So, is this permanent? Maxim asked as he sat on the stool by the small island. Or until my boss gets another promotion. Then I might go with him if I want a raise, Iris said, leaning against the kitchen counter. So where's your stuff? Summer asked, not seeing a mountain of boxes piled throughout the apartment. I only brought clothes, perfume, that kind of stuff, so I didn't have to carry half a house on my back, Iris joked. I can buy the rest of the necessities when I apartment hunt. So Dad told you about your sister's friend. Where is he? Summer asked, looking her sister up and down as her cheeks flushed slightly. At his place, it's almost lunchtime anyway. Let me see if he's up yet, Iris said, pushing off the counter and walking towards the door. She didn't think her sister or her husband would follow her. What? I'm not letting you warn him about us, Summer said with a sly grin. Keep your claws in, Iris warned as she knocked on Tristan's apartment door. She waited a few seconds, seeing if she could hear anything through the door, before she knocked a bit harder, again and again. After the third knock, she heard shuffling footsteps getting closer. She took a step back as she heard the deadbolt unlock. Huh? Tristan mumbled sleepily, his brain not registering that he was shirtless in front of Iris and two strangers only wearing pajamas. Oh, hi there, sailor, Iris purred as she glanced down at his chest, wondering if he hid all of that under his business attire. Also wondering if she could use his six-pack abs to scrub her wet panties. What do you think, sis? She asked, looking over her shoulder. They're nice, Maxim's bigger, Summer teased, stroking her husband's ego. Sorry, Tristan. This is my sister and her husband, and since it's almost noon, I figured you might be up again. Sorry for waking you, and they want to meet you. Plus, if you want, I really want to be with you, Iris said, trying not to get riled up as she realized her voice still affected him in his sleepy mind. She'd never seen a man get an erection just from hearing her voice. She didn't know how or what to do with that right now. Okay, let me get dressed. Nice to meet you both, Tristan said, trying not to yawn as he extended his hand to Summer and Maxim. So, what's the deal with you two? Summer asked as they were waiting in her sister's apartment. Plus, she was sure she'd use that time to question the man her sister was clearly interested in. She just didn't know why her sister was acting this way. Ever since Iris started dating, she'd never been this shy around someone she liked. Tristan yawned softly as he pulled down his shirttails and adjusted his jacket before leaving and locking his apartment door. He heard their voices through the door as he got closer. 3 soft, throaty knocks echoed at the door, signaling his arrival. Hey Tristan, come in, we're just catching up, Iris said she had taken the time to redo her hair. Something she hoped Tristan would like. She hid her smirk as he looked at her hair more than once before he stepped into her apartment. Have you ever had Tennessee beg you while you were here? She asked as her jacket was placed on her shoulder. No, mostly takeout. Since I have to spend a lot of time tackling the ever-increasing workload, Tristan said, keeping his thoughts to himself. Then we need to go to Brookshaw's old country store if I want him to have good southern food, Maxim said with a knowing smirk at his sister-in-law. He and Summer joked about how Iris acted when she was in the bathroom, doing her makeup and hair. Good choice, Iris said, pushing Tristan out the door so her sister and Maxim didn't see the blush she was trying to hide. So Tristan, what brought you to Tennessee? Summer asked as they were waiting for their food to be served. Plus, she was sure she'd use that time to question the man her sister was clearly interested in. She just didn't know why her sister was acting that way. Since Iris started dating, she had never been this shy around someone she liked. I got offered a position as the Southeast Regional CTO for our company. What do you and your husband do? Tristan asked, taking a sip of his lemonade. My wife and I are long-haul truckers, Maxim said, observing the man across from him. So far he hadn't felt anything off about Tristan. He knew that would be one of the main things Summer would be worried about. No one followed you down here, Summer asked, frowning as Iris kicked her shin under the table. She was quite puzzled by her sister's behavior as she mumbled something she couldn't quite hear. No, at least I hope not, Tristan admitted. All he needed was his estranged wife to know she actually loved him and uprooted her life to follow him. He wasn't that selfish to think she'd even care that he left, or that she suddenly realized he was the best option for her. However, the nightmare of her showing up at his doorstep weighed heavily on him. So, you've been single all this time? Maxim asked, butting in, ignoring Iris's glare. No, just without a wife anymore, Tristan said honestly. Oh, sorry, Summer said, a little embarrassed. Though, she saw a flash of anger in his eyes when he said those words. After a few moments of silence, their food was served. While their meal was fairly quiet, Summer and Iris took the time to catch up on what she'd missed since she left and the changes in their hometown. Tristan thought their lunch was pretty okay, if not intrusive into his personal life for someone they just met. As the bill was settled, the 4 of them parted ways, as Summer would take Iris shopping for things she needed for her new apartment. As he got into his car, he nodded and waved to Iris, who did the same before he pulled out of his parking spot. 6 months later. Tristan's jaw tightened as he watched a news video on YouTube of old Mark announcing his run for president. His nostrils flared as he noticed Ariel just standing to the side and away from Mark's fiery speech. However, he didn't miss how the man's wife looked at him. A wicked grin spread across his lips, thinking of what that woman would do with his ass after he got a pound of flesh. His eyes flickered up as he heard a phone somewhere in his office. He heard her voice, seeing the strands of her blonde hair through the crack of the blinds before he returned his attention to the video. So, that's him? Iris's voice startled him as he jumped in his seat, making her giggle shyly. Why would you say that? Tristan stammered. I haven't seen you look at anyone like that here since we moved here. It has to be him then, Iris said, hearing the newscaster coming from the monitor's speakers. She had seen when the news was aired a week ago. She was worried that Tristan was obsessed with the man and his soon-to-be ex-wife. Over the past 6 months, she had subtly become closer to him, especially after Tristan helped her move into the apartment she found after her first month in Jackson. While it was true she had gone out with 3 different men, she had to see if what she was starting to feel for Tristan was real. The dates never ended how the men wanted, namely sex to the point of insanity. Though the last guy she went out with was a bit possessive on their second date. She wouldn't go, but she still hadn't come to the conclusion she was looking for. Actually, deep down, Iris knew who she wanted. She was just ignoring what her heart was telling her. Yeah. So you're still not over. She knew she was wrong seeing his eyes. I've forgotten her for 5 years. But what I haven't forgotten is her getting everything she wanted, and nothing, damn it, seems to come back to bite them, Tristan hissed. Like my pastor told me when I was little, sometimes God works through you to bring karma to someone else's sins, Iris said, watching how he would take her religious background. She needed to know how he would take her as a strong believer in her faith. Oh, Tristan mused, wondering if this was a sign to go ahead with what he'd planned when that man ran. But first he needed to make sure nothing could be traced back to him when he started the plan. He didn't need that jackass chasing him if he thought he had something to do with his downfall. A man with nothing to lose is a dangerous man. I'll have to think about that. Maybe someday you'll want to come with me. I think that would help you, Iris said, just to spend any free time she could with him. Huh? Tris, feeling her cheeks flush at the nickname he allowed her to call him. Don't get me wrong, but I'm tired of seeing the anger in your eyes. Is holding on to it really worth it? All it does is poison your heart and turn you into a man you're not. And I think if you came with me, you might find forgiveness within yourself so you can leave her so far behind you that she'll never step into it again, Iris said, subtly hinting at what she hoped he would understand. I don't know, Iris, would your God allow me to go through with this? He knew he upset her seeing her frown when he mentioned the day he usually had off at the end of the week. Tris, God wouldn't do that to you. Our choices do. He gave us free will. If I were to compare what you're going through, it would be like Jezebel and King Ahab. And she met a bad end, prophesied, Tristan predicted, Iris said, seeing the amusement dancing in Tristan's eyes. She tightened her grip as his desk phone interrupted their conversation, but she let it go as she knew it had to be one of his bosses, as only they called him directly. I'll be out. I really want to end this conversation, she whispered as she closed his office door. Hello, this is Tristan Wilkins, he greeted as he answered the phone. His back straightened hearing his boss's voice on the line. I'll be right up, Mom, Tristan said, quickly getting up. Hold my phone until I get back, he commanded as he stood by Iris's desk and adjusted his jacket. What's up? Iris whispered softly while making sure no one was eavesdropping. Don't know, Ms. Raidmaker didn't tell me, Tristan said, making sure his tie was straight as he looked at his reflection in the office window's glass. Hopefully I'll be back in a few minutes. Iris watched him walk towards the elevator. She silently prayed to God, hoping that it wasn't to reprimand him about their relationship. If she had to choose between her job or being with Tristan, she would always choose Tristan. She just didn't want him to get in trouble just for liking her. Tristan stepped onto the 8th floor as the doors slowly closed behind him. He looked around before going to her office. He didn't know why he was called to her office. As far as he knew, his department was exceeding their yearly projections. So, he knew this couldn't be related to his department, so it had to be personal. If that was the case, could he actually stay away from Iris so she could keep her job? Could he endure the distance he had to put between them so no one would think something untoward could put the company in financial trouble? As his dress shoes were muffled by the carpet, he admitted to himself that if that happened, it would be heartbreaking not to see or talk to her. His mind was in a turmoil as he told the boss's assistant that he was expected, thanking the woman as she told him he could go in. Hello, Mr. Wilkins, Ms. Raidmaker said as she stood up from behind her desk to greet her subordinate and invited him to sit. First, I'd like to ask, since you've been here for 6 months now, how are you finding it? Fine, ma'am, Tristan said honestly. Good, I'm glad. I've only received good remarks from your department. Now, back to why I called you up here. Tristan stared in confusion at the plane ticket the woman placed in front of him. The annual retreat will be in 2 months. This year, the company will be sending us, the executives, to the Chetty Andermatt in Switzerland, which will give you enough time to get a passport or update it if you already have one. You can bring a guest. Their ticket is included along with the commendation from HQ. If you don't want to go, just let us know a month in advance so we can send the ticket back. Where? Tristan asked, quite puzzled. This wasn't what he thought their meeting would be about. "Oh, you'll love it, they've had it there for a few years now," she said with a friendly smile. "And how long will this be?" "Usually they last a week and a half, but we tend to spend a day or two traveling. It won't be counted against your vacation time, and you will be paid for it. Think of it as a way to unwind in luxury after all the hard work you've done since you got here." Tristan was still a little shocked as he stepped back onto the elevator after his boss saw him step out of the office. He had forgotten about the trip when his old boss told him about it when he was hired. Looking down at the tickets, he wondered who he would ask. He knew his uncle would want to come with him. Though that meant his uncle would want to bring his wife, his aunt, but that wasn't a pleasant prospect. It's not that he didn't love his uncle, he did. He just didn't like him for giving Ariel his new phone number, something he specifically asked them not to do. Their relationship had become quite frosty since then. He was still deep in thought as he approached the office. Taking his eyes off the floor, he had to look twice as the lights caught Iris's blonde hair as she was doing something at her desk. "Oh my God. He's staring at me." Calm down, pretend you don't notice," Iris mumbled to herself as she remained focused on the paperwork in front of her. "Oh hey, I didn't think you'd be back so soon," she said, acting like she just noticed him. "How did it go?" "Good, I think so," Tristan stated, berating himself for staring at Iris like he was 13 again. "So what's that about?" Iris innocently asked. She was hoping that what she just saw would lead to something more between them. "How about we go to my office?" "Okay," Iris said, trying to hide the nervousness in her voice. "Tris, you're starting to make me nervous," she softly exclaimed. "Sorry, nothing bad, I promise," Tristan said, muffling the closing of his office door. "So the meeting wasn't about us then?" Iris asked, worried that she would have to quit her job and miss all the time she was supposed to have with him. "No, I don't think so," Tristan admitted. Then, her eyes followed Tristan's hand as he placed something in front of her. Her eyes widened, seeing it was a plane ticket. "Tris, what's this?" "The management retreat is in 2 months, in Switzerland, and they said I can bring a guest, since I don't really have close relationships with many people here except you. If you want to go, you'll need a ticket." "I know, I have one," Iris said, cutting Tristan off. "I figured since Conrad's working in Canada, I'd go visit him since he left his truck when he did. So you want me to come with you?" "Sure, but if you're not comfortable, I'll tell them I'm not interested in going," Tristan shrugged. Iris hummed as she opened the flyer with her plane ticket and saw it was first class for round trip. "Wanna go?" "Can't say yet. But I figure I should since I'm the new guy. And chances are they'll have something there I don't know about. I just get that feeling," Tristan said nonchalantly. "Then I'll go, but I thought you'd be going with one of the women you're dating," Iris said, trying not to show the displeasure in her voice. "Nah, they're beautiful but not worth taking around the world, and honestly, we don't really click," Tristan said, knowing his attempts to move on with his life hadn't gone as he'd thought. "Then I'll make sure I take my vacation days," Iris said, dancing in her mind at what he just said. She would use the trip to show him how she felt about him. She couldn't wait. She knew she would have to update her wardrobe for the trip and her lingerie. She didn't want to wear anything she wore for Conrad. No, that wouldn't be right. If they were going to start their relationship there, then what she wore couldn't be associated with others. She wanted a clean slate for both of them. She hoped by the time they got together, all the anger she still felt would finally dissipate, because she wouldn't be like his soon-to-be ex-wife. Call her obsessed if you want, but she'd been counting down the days until his wife could file for divorce. When that happened, she was determined to make Tristan hers and only hers. 2 months later. 8 hectic months had passed since Mark announced his presidential candidacy. Ariel's job had exploded since then, fielding reporter questions, arranging interviews with morning news shows, and making sure Mark shone like a beacon in the storm. As she sat in their morning strategy meeting, planning a rebuttal to the GOP's latest lies circulating on talk radio, lies she knew were easily debunked with a simple Google search, she knew they were on the upswing. They'd surged after the Iowa caucus, where Mark dominated the field. Most of the other Democrats running had dropped out and endorsed Mark, except for one woman who was holding on and seemingly gaining ground. Ariel could see this woman becoming a problem. Her rise was rapid. Mark had even offered her a spot as his running mate, but the woman's reaction to Mark's generous offer wasn't what Ariel expected. They all knew the woman couldn't beat Mark, they just didn't know why she wouldn't or couldn't step aside. As she listened to Mark's campaign manager detail their plans for the second South Carolina debate, her phone buzzed on the table in front of her. Ariel raised an eyebrow at the text from a friend asking if she knew where her husband was. As far as she knew, Tristan was somewhere she didn't know and couldn't easily find out. Even Tristan's aunt wasn't helping, or couldn't in this case, as it seemed the aunt wasn't allowed to give her Tristan's new number, and there seemed to be some bad blood between them. She knew Tristan's uncle wasn't particularly fond of her, not that she cared what his uncle thought. However, she figured they would at least let her know how to contact him to discuss their inevitable divorce. "No, why?" Ariel quickly texted back. "OMG." Ariel pursed her lips at the laughing emoji her friend sent. "If you're going to tell me you're sleeping with him, I don't want to know." "What? No, I haven't ridden him since he left. No, I mean I know where he is right now." "Okay, why are you telling me this? Tristan and I are separated." "Because I think Tristan finally got himself a better deal." Again, her friend's laughing emoji annoyed her as she waited for the picture she'd sent to load. "I wonder if you weren't such a bitch, you'd be in Switzerland right now," her friend sneered as Ariel stared at the picture of Tristan with his arm around a woman far too young for him, in her opinion. "Where did you get this?" "Off Facebook, someone tagged him and it popped up on my feed. I didn't know he got promoted. I wonder if he'd be with him now if he'd never found out about you. Oh, I wonder if he needs a friend." "What's he doing in Switzerland?" Ariel muttered, zooming in on the picture of her husband. She gripped her phone tighter as she saw the woman in the picture looking at him while Tristan looked away and smiled. She'd forgotten what he looked like when he smiled. All she'd seen was anger for the past 5 years. She almost wondered why he hadn't told her the news, then shook her head, thinking better of it after their last blow-up. "I don't think I'm flying to Switzerland to call you a whore, Jen." "No, but when he comes back, that's a whole other issue. If you think you're upsetting me about any of this, you're not. Tristan doesn't want me in his life, and I don't have time for him anyway. Seems like he has someone new, so why are you bothering me with this?" "No reason other than to let you know, your soon-to-be ex-husband upgraded." Ariel didn't understand why they were still friends, with Jen making no secret of her affair with her husband. She ignored her friend's message as she pulled back and opened the message linked to Tristan's new number. "She's a little young for him, don't you think, Tristan?" Her phone buzzed instantly in her hand as she saw an incoming call. She apologized, gently closing the meeting room door behind her, and answered. "Tristan?" "No way, bitch. I told you to leave my man alone. He doesn't want anything to do with you anymore. Why is this so hard to understand?" Ariel felt rage boil over as she listened to the woman berate her over the line. "Who he's dating is none of your business anymore. You're better off bending over and selling yourself to a serial cheater than being loyal to a good man, but he's mine now, and I'm not letting go like you did. So save us both the trouble and go die." With that, her call ended abruptly, and a picture was sent to her phone. Her nostrils flared as she saw a hand gripping a cock, positioned to penetrate the woman on the other end. A single tear fell. It still hurt that Tristan hated her this much, even after 8 months apart. Iris, could you maybe take your hand away?" Tristan asked, his eyes unable to leave the beauty straddling him. "Why?" The question caught him off guard, and he couldn't quite formulate an appropriate answer. His toes curled as she gently stroked his shaft. Initially, this was only meant to annoy Ariel. She didn't want to dwell on the lack of contact. With the picture Iris had sent her, he hoped it would finally show her she wasn't welcome. "Why should I stop?" "Are you telling me you don't want this?" Iris asked, a coy smile playing on her lips as he watched him press his head into the pillow as she trailed the head of his shaft across her throbbing labia. She wanted this as much as she knew Tristan did, especially after their 3 days in Andermatt, Switzerland. The first night, Tristan took her to a very fancy restaurant. The next was a hot night out on the town, where she finally got him out on the dance floor when Lady Antebellum's Need You Now started playing. While she was sure most of the men there thought she was dancing for them, she still kept her hair up as she shook her hips with her back to him, glancing over her left shoulder where she knew their table was. She finally revealed the emotion she'd hidden from him in her eyes. There was no mistaking the longing, the need in those eyes as she felt his hand on her hip. Only then did she turn to face him. With the gate flung open, nothing could stop what was about to happen. She didn't care if their boss was there that night. She would give it all up if she could be with him. To her, Tristan was all that truly mattered as she reached up, tiptoed, and proceeded to place a steamy kiss on his lips. No, I don't. But Tristan hadn't expected Iris to grind her face into his as she hovered above him. Tristan, shut up and fuck me, Iris said before her tongue slid into his mouth. Her breath hitched as her hips instinctively moved, feeling the heat radiating from his shaft as she rubbed herself along its length. Goosebumps erupted across her back as she felt his hands travel down her back before they cupped her ass. Normally, she really enjoyed foreplay, but at that moment she only wanted one thing and one thing only: to feel Tristan deep inside her burning hot mound. A small seductive smile played on her lips as she reached behind her. A gasp, then a moan escaped her lips as she slowly lowered herself onto his shaft. Her muscles quivered as she felt every inch of him. She knew her tightness would send him over the edge in minutes. It had been 8 months since she'd had sex with anyone. The only person she'd ever had sex with was Conrad. She didn't want a string of men behind her to show how many men she'd slept with. She didn't care if it was 1 or 10, it didn't matter to her. What mattered was Tristan knowing fully that she was his, and his alone. She didn't need to seek out men, not when she had the one she'd longed for from afar. Oh God, yes, right there, Tris, fuck me. Oh God. Iris cried out in ecstasy as he grasped her hips and thrust his point into the center of her garden. What are you waiting for, Tristan? Stir my kitty some more, I know you're not done yet. Not when I can feel your rock hard in my hot little kitty, Iris said in the most seductive voice she could muster at that moment. A grin spread across her lips as Tristan helped her up. It wasn't a position she'd tried before, but she still straddled him while he remained kneeling on the bed. Iris, I'm going to, Tristan groaned because for the past 30 minutes, he'd done everything he could to delay his orgasm. Do it, baby, Iris panted and gasped as her thighs strained to keep up with the pace she'd maintained. Her eyes rolled back into her head as her cream spilled down her canal, as his cum shot out of the head of his shaft, flooding her womb. Both lay on his bed, exhausted, both drenched in sweat, as they stared at the ceiling of Tristan's hotel room. So, what do we do now? Tristan asked, panting. Tris, we both know there's something between us. Your little guy wouldn't be hard every time I talk, if there wasn't. Iris said with a knowing smile as she lay on her right side, looking at him lovingly, feeling his cum seeping out of her. I saw the way you look at me. I'm sure you saw the way I look at you. I've sat there every day for the past 8 months, listening to whatever woman you were interested in talk about her dates or whatever, and I hated it. Oh? I know this is going to get us in trouble. I know you're a good man, and I know you're not acting on your feelings for me, because I'm your assistant, Iris said, inching closer to him. The moment she felt his arm wrap around her only caused her to press herself against him, rubbing her naked thigh against his as her left hand rested on his chest. And you don't want me to lose my job just because you're attracted to me. I don't care about any of that. I'll quit my job if I have to. All I want is to be with you and to be yours and yours alone. It's all true. You know the only reason I've been going out with them is because they're not you, Tristan admitted, his eyes flicking to hers as Iris propped herself up on her right arm to look at him. Really? Really, Tristan nodded. You have no idea how much I want to kiss you, touch you, hold you, and everything in between. Okay, I'm here. What are you waiting for? Iris asked with a teasing smile. She couldn't help the moan that escaped her lips as she felt the truth in his words in that kiss. Oh my! She yelped in surprise as Tristan slipped 2 fingers inside her, arching her back as his thumb rubbed her clit as he prepared her for round 2. 2 weeks later. Tristan leaned back in his office chair, feeling the pleasant relief of a workday almost over. No more 12 to 14-hour shifts. No, when the workday ended, he'd be heading out, holding everyone in the office, except him and Iris, off their dates so they left at different times, just to see her in his apartment waiting for him to come home before she greeted him with a loving kiss and a quick blowjob. He didn't just let her do all the work, he reciprocated by hoisting her onto the kitchen counter, pulling down her panties, and tasting that hot little thing of hers. He knew she appreciated it, the fact that she almost deafened him a couple of times told him that. Since Iris had declared her feelings for him, he honestly hadn't been thinking about his ex or Mark. However, seeing he had the upper hand over his opponent, he knew he had to get involved. He didn't care who ran the country, he thought both parties were just bad actors, full of hot air. He wasn't, however, going to let old Marky Mark get away with it. So he spent a few minutes on his computer looking up ways to get in touch with the woman running against him. Tristan reached down and pulled open the second drawer where he kept the burner phone he'd bought. He wasn't planning on letting anyone trace that number. Even if Ariel accused him of destroying her little sex toy, there was no way she could prove it, or he hoped things would go that way. As he looked past the office window blinds and saw Iris's chair empty, a wave of sadness washed over him, as he couldn't see her smile getting him through this. His fingers moved across the numerical keypad as he entered the woman's number. "Yes, hello. This is K. Marshall's office. How may I direct your call?" "Yes, I need to speak to Ms. Marshall. If she asks who this is, tell her I have a way to help her secure the NANC nomination." "Okay, look here, buddy. I don't know who you are. I have verifiable proof that her opponent isn't as squeaky clean as he makes out. Does she want it or not? I'm sure her Republican opponents would love to get their hands on what I have on that mat." "Okay, hold please." His fingernails tapped lightly on the desk as he listened to the elevator music they were playing over the line. Then he heard what he heard when the man transferred him to her line. "Hello, this is K. Marshall. My secretary says you have something you want me to see. May I ask who's calling?" "Call me Mr. X. I have to protect myself, you understand." "Okay, Mr. X, why do you think you have something that interests me?" "How badly do you want to win?" "Because of that cheating whore. Very badly. Why?" "Then I think we should meet. So you know I'm not lying. I'll give you the case numbers, and you can look them up yourself, as everything is public record. However, Mark has done his best to ensure his past doesn't resurface," Tristan said, giving her one of the case numbers he'd found. "I'll look this up in a bit, and if what you're saying is true, I agree, we need to meet." He heard her typing. He didn't need to look up information on her. Her legal background had been all over the airwaves since she announced. So, he knew she wouldn't have any problems looking up that information. It only took a minute or two before he heard her gasp. "Is this for real?" Tristan chuckled madly, knowing he had her hooked. "Every word. And I have more, much more, enough to ensure he'll never hold public office again without serving a very long prison sentence." "How quickly can you get to Mississippi?" "A few hours. Why?" "I'll be in Tupelo, Mississippi tomorrow. If you call this number back tomorrow, I'll have my staff pick a discreet location where we can talk without anyone eavesdropping." "Okay, I'll call this number at 10 a.m. tomorrow. If you don't answer, I'll find another way to get this information out to the public." "Don't worry, Mr. X, I'll be there. What you have isn't something I want to pass up." "Glad to hear that. Until then," Tristan said, hanging up. As he stepped out of the elevator and into their building's lobby, his main cell phone rang. Pulling it out of his inside breast pocket and seeing it was Iris's number, a smile spread across his face. He knew she had gone to her parents' house, as that's where she spent most of her weekends seeing her family and going to the church where she grew up on Sundays, and she'd always be back before 3 a.m. "Sunday. Hey," he answered sweetly. "Hey, baby." You didn't understand why her voice affected him so much, but ever since first hearing her normal tone, he couldn't help but feel his own hardness hearing that voice. "I hope you don't miss me too much this weekend." "That'll happen after all the sex I've been giving you for the past 2 weeks, Tristan teased as he stepped out of the front door. I've got your thighs hard." "Oh? If I come back I'll get something else tight," Tristan flirted. "Very tempting. I'll have to keep my eye on you." Promise. "You don't mind if I stay over Sunday night? I miss you already, and I'm not even an hour on the road yet." "Oh, I miss you too. But I'm sure you won't want to be here tomorrow." "Why?" Tristan heard the worry in her voice. "Driving down to Tupelo." "Why?" Iris asked again. "To finish my past, as you've reminded me so many times. I can't start moving forward if I'm still living in the past. So, I think I should finally close that chapter of my life." "I understand. Well, I'm glad you're doing that. That woman isn't on your mind, is she?" "What? Heavens no, I haven't thought about her in about 3 weeks," Tristan replied, knowing it would bring a big smile to her face. As it should be. Tristan didn't reprimand her for the arrogance he heard in that statement. "When are you going to be down?" "Oh, it's a 2-hour drive this early in the morning. Might as well get it over with," Tristan said, stuffing the packets of documents he'd compiled from copies of the files he had into the mail to send to news outlets nationwide. That was his backup plan if the woman didn't use what he would give her to take that bastard down. So, hopefully I'll be done before 11. Why? Okay, if you're going to be down in Tupelo, you can stop by Oxford and get me, Iris offered, hoping Tristan would bite. It's only an hour from Tupelo. You think I'd say no? Great. Okay, these idiots are getting annoying. Release me so I don't have to run into one of these fools. Text me when you get home. Okay, talk to you later. Love you. The 2 words stunned him. Before he could reply, the line went dead. He didn't think they'd been dating long enough for her to say that. Then again, he didn't know how long she'd been feeling that way in the months before they'd started dating. Iris was frantic for the rest of the drive to her parents' house in Oxford. She couldn't believe she'd said that to him. She knew it was too soon to say that. Yet she did. It wasn't that she didn't feel that way about him, but she didn't know how Tristan would react. As she drove into her parents' driveway, she slammed her head on the steering wheel, praying to God that she hadn't ruined their relationship. She knew she needed to get out. Look at the look her father and mother gave her, as she just sat there berating herself for what she'd done. She couldn't stop. It wasn't like she wanted to stop in the first place. Since they'd gotten together, she knew they were meant to be. She couldn't explain it, but something inside her told her that it was so. Her heart skipped a beat in her chest as she saw his text saying he'd gotten home safely. But he didn't mention her slip-up. She was grateful for that. However, she knew that when he showed up tomorrow, they would be talking about it. "What's got you down, honey?" her father asked as he and his wife saw their daughter's sad face. "I think I said something I shouldn't have. At least not right now," Iris said while hugging her parents tightly. "Hudson, why don't you do something manly while mother and daughter have a girly chat?" her mother said, wrapping her arms around her daughter as she led Iris towards the front door. "Okay, I think I should go over to Greg's for a bit. That way you two will have plenty of time to talk," Hudson said, kissing his wife and kissing his daughter's temple before heading down the stairs. "Now, tell me what's going on," her mother said, gently nudging her into a kitchen chair. The chair Iris always used when she was little. "Oh, you didn't say that." Her mother gasped as Iris recounted what she'd said. "Oh, honey, the world isn't ending," she said lovingly as she rubbed her daughter's back as she hung her head in shame. "Do you want to know something?" "Okay," Iris replied weakly. "I felt the same way about your father when I first met him many years ago." "Really?" Iris muttered in shock. The first time I saw him in his Letterman jacket, Lord, I thought he was hot. Then, when he walked up to me, out of all people, when I knew he could have any girl in school, and asked me to a movie, I went crazy. Of course I didn't tell your father that, nor did I show it, but right here, patting her heart, I knew. I don't ask me how I knew, but I knew your father was the man I was going to marry. I'm not saying it's all been sunshine and rainbows because I know you and Summer have heard plenty of our arguments before. But we've stuck together, and that love I felt on that first day only grew stronger over the years we've been together. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't thank God for bringing Hudson into my life. I know if I didn't have him, I wouldn't have you or your sister, and I would be living such an empty life. So, you said it before you, or he, were ready. If Tristan is the man you think he is, then you know this won't be the end of you two. If it is, then he isn't the man I thought of when your father and I first met. But. No buts, honey. Don't think with your head in matters of the heart that will always lead you astray. See, she patted her heart again. You knew the truth just like he knew the truth about your father, she said, seeing her blush rise and Iris's smile return, as she took a few minutes to review what she'd just said. "Thanks, Mom, I just hope he doesn't think I'm crazy," Iris said, though some of the weight lifted from her chest. The fear of unrequited love still lingered. "Honey, if he felt that way about you, he definitely wouldn't. So, you understand that your relationship is serious, right?" "I know I'm crazy about him. When we're apart, it feels like there's a hole in my heart. When I'm with him, I feel so safe in his arms," Iris said, her eyes gazing dreamily into the distance. "And you didn't feel that way with Conrad?" "Not to the extent of what I feel for Tristan," Iris said, looking down at the table, slightly embarrassed by the smile her mother gave her. "Then there's only one thing for it, sis," Summer said, walking into her parents' house without bothering to knock. "You better bring that man around more, because you need to see if he can handle this family," she joked, dodging a dish towel her mother threw at her. So, he told me he's estranged from his wife. Why hasn't he gotten a divorce yet? I can't say. Iris trailed off, unsure if Tristan would want their private matters aired like this. Oh, I want to know, Summer said, walking up beside her and quickly snatching her sister's phone from the table. Seriously, you call him Beau? She teased her sister, stepping out of her sister's range, but not her mother's, who patted her leg instead of Iris's. Stop teasing your sister, their mother scolded. I'm just curious. I call Maxim that too. I think Mom gave us that name, Summer said, grinning at her sister as their mother rolled her eyes at the screen. Her sister, however, looked terrified as she dialed Tristan's number and put it on speakerphone. Hey, Iris. Summer observed the light in her sister's eyes increase as well as her little smile at hearing Tristan's voice. Hey, Beau, Summer blurted out, biting her lip as she saw Iris look at her as she called him by the pet name. Who is this? This is Summer. Iris is here with me and our mother. We've been talking about you, and it's reached the point where Iris doesn't want to talk about it anymore. So, we thought we should ask the source. She explained why she was calling him on her sister's phone. Okay, so? Why haven't you gotten a divorce yet? You said you didn't have a wife anymore when we had lunch 8 months ago. So, what's the deal? Are you still married or not? The state still thinks we're married, that's true, but we haven't been husband and wife for a long time. Then why are you leading my sister on if you're still hung up on your wife? I'm not hung up on her. If you're still legally married, then yes, you are, Summer retorted. His anger surprised her a little. Don't you think that's leading my sister on while you're estranged from your wife? In 4 more months, she'll be able to divorce me. Summer and her mother exchanged glances as they noticed how upset Iris was as she questioned Tristan. Okay, but why? If you care about my sister, wouldn't you want to end things without cheating on Iris? Because I don't want that cheating bitch. Sorry, I don't want to give her a dime of my money. See, now there are a whole bunch of other questions, Summer exclaimed, holding her other arm up in the air. Why don't you want to provide for the woman who gave you years of her life and for the kids she might have with you? I don't have kids, and she's not my wife. So why should I give her a dime when she slept with the same man for 12 years of our marriage? Wait a minute, what? Summer stammered. Tris, I'm sorry. I'm not involved in this. Summer stole my phone, Iris said loud enough for Tristan to hear. I guess Iris and I anticipated these kinds of questions from your family, just didn't expect it to be this soon. So, can you elaborate on what you meant by that? Who's talking? Tristan asked as another woman spoke up. This is Sarah, Iris's mother. I also want to know why you haven't divorced your wife yet. Oh, hi Sarah. Simple. For the first 7 years of our marriage, I thought we had a loving marriage, only to find out the daughters I'd raised for 7 years weren't mine. They're the children of the man currently running for president. Do you have proof? Are you just misdirecting your anger? Of course I have proof. Do you think I wouldn't? Do you think I'd abandon my children? But I don't need to prove anything to either of you. Sorry, Iris. But what happened in my past isn't something that needs to be shared with people I barely know. Then why not divorce her? Summer asked again as she heard him sigh over the phone. We're going in circles. I haven't filed because if I do, she'll find out where I'm living and will do everything she can to get back at me for leaving her. But you need to get a divorce so you can properly date my sister. Why? All that is a formal ending to a marriage that shouldn't have happened. We separated when Iris and I started our relationship, so legally I'm a free man, as they say. I don't like it, Summer stated her opinion. And? This isn't about you. It's about me and Iris, and how we feel about each other, not about what your sister or her mother thinks about my circumstances. That will come to a conclusion one way or another. Tris, I'm sorry. It's okay, Iris, they're just looking out for you. I'll call you back later. With that, he hung up. Oh, he definitely didn't like. Summer, shut up. Iris yelled, surprising her mother and sister. What did you think would happen? That he'd happily talk about his soon-to-be ex-wife? That he'd open up to you when you don't even know the first thing about him? Oh my God, my baby sister is in love. Summer teased, causing her sister to groan before Iris ran off to her old bedroom. It was 9:50 a.m. when he sat down in the park, at the spot Mims Marshall had requested. He looked around casually, waiting for her arrival. As he waited, a creeping feeling of being set up began to gnaw at him, a feeling that whatever he'd brought wouldn't see the light of day. His fears proved unfounded, though, when a woman in a long tan coat, large sunglasses, and a scarf approached the picnic table. Her style felt dated. He felt like he was meeting a spy in a bad movie. "I presume you're Mr. X?" Kay asked, stopping a few feet from the table. Hands in pockets, her right hand subtly fiddled with a recording device. She had a feeling Mark had sent this man to entrap her, dangling a juicy appetizer while the rest was garbage designed to make her look bad. "I am, and you must be Miss Marshall," Tristan replied, rising to shake her hand. "I am," she said, taking his hand and seating herself opposite him. "So you say you have substantial evidence against Mark?" "I do," Tristan said, producing a thick manila envelope from his coat and placing it before her. He could see her eyes dart to it, then back to him from behind her sunglasses. When he gestured for her to look, Kay didn't hesitate, diving right in. Tristan watched as the woman's eyes widened in shock, then disgust, as she flipped through the 5 years' worth of incriminating documents he'd compiled. "And this is all verifiable?" she asked. "Of course. You think I'd just make something up? No way. I've been planning this takedown for years, and I know no fabrication will do the job. It has to be solid proof of his crimes, otherwise he walks free," Tristan said calmly. "But I'm nobody who'd believe me. You, on the other hand, have the whole country watching you. You have credibility. They'll take what you say far more seriously than if it came from me." "Is this all you have?" "Just copies. I'm keeping the originals for safekeeping, you understand," Tristan said, getting a nod from her. "I understand. My team and I will need a few days to go over this, and if what you say is true, well, let's just say Mark will be taken off the board." "No, see, you're thinking too small. I want him destroyed." "Sir, I understand your anger, but that's not my goal, but I promise to use this," Kay said, rising from her seat and gathering the documents as she felt their meeting was over. Little did she know, the news outlets he'd sent it to wouldn't be so gentle with the incoming information. While Tristan wasn't happy with Kay's response, he knew old Mark would now be facing a two-front war. History, he knew, favored no one who fought that way. Pulling out his phone as he rose from the bench, his job here was done. His thumb scrolled to Iris's number. "Hey, did you take care of business?" Iris's sweet voice chirped after the call connected. "Yeah, it's done. Still want me to stop by?" Tristan asked as he walked across the park to his car. He didn't want anyone knowing who he'd met or why he'd been in the park that morning. "Of course. Do I even need to ask?" "Okay, I'll be there in about an hour. But if your family bothers me, I'm getting payback," Tristan declared as he unlocked his car. "Deal, and I'll always have your back if they do." Tristan raised an eyebrow at that. "So, we're talking about what we talked about yesterday?" "You want to?" "I think we should," Tristan countered. "Okay, but I'm not doing this over the phone." "All right, see you in an hour." Iris practically leaped out of her parents' house the moment Tristan pulled up behind her car, as he pulled into their private driveway an hour and a few minutes later. Her blonde hair whipped behind her as she spotted his grinning face. Tristan stumbled back a step or two as Iris launched herself into his arms. Her intake of breath echoed in both their ears as she kissed Tristan passionately, pouring out how much she'd missed him since their separation yesterday. "Wow," Tristan said breathlessly. "Maybe I should go away more often," he said with a mischievous grin. "You better not," Iris whispered, pressing her 36 billion chest against his. "If you do, I might chain you to the bed and ravish you until you can't take it anymore." "Goodness, how quirky. I didn't know you had that in you," Tristan said, watching Iris's cheeks flush crimson. "Oh, you'd be surprised," Iris said, her eyes sparkling. "Come on," she said, gently tugging him toward her parents' porch, hoping she wasn't moving too fast for him. "Good afternoon, Tristan," Hudson greeted him with a nod. "Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Ortiz, it's good to see you again," Tristan said, nodding to them both. "Hi, Tristan," Sarah said, shaking Tristan's hand. "Didn't you say you were from Indiana?" Hudson asked, leading them into the house. "I did," Tristan agreed. "What parts?" Sarah asked. "North Akron, your folks own a pig and cattle farm," Tristan said. He knew what they were doing. While they hadn't cared much about what he did when they first met, now that they were dating they wanted to grill him, so to speak. "Oh? So what brings you all the way to Maine?" Hudson asked, offering Tristan a beer, which he quickly declined since he was driving back. "Tea?" Sarah offered. Sure, Tristan nodded. A promotion, sort of. That's what brought me here. So what brought you two here? Hudson asked, leading them into the living room. Some business to attend to in Tupelo, Iris. Here, Tristan smiled as her cheeks flushed as he said that. Wondered if you would visit her since you were nearby, Tristan announced to them, glancing down as Iris gently laced her fingers through his. So, how did it go? Iris asked, her thumb stroking his hand affectionately. Didn't go as I'd hoped, but it's a start, Tristan admitted. He wondered how the news outlets would take the information he'd sent them. He hoped they would take what he sent them seriously. He kept a sinister smile on his face as he thought about how Omar would react when everything came crashing down around him. So Tristan, can I call you Tris? Summer asked, noticing her sister's eyes narrowing at her question. No offense, I don't know you that well, Tristan stated bluntly, not at all fazed to see Iris smile at that. And when will you? Summer asked. Then try me, Tristan shrugged, feeling Iris's gentle squeeze on his hand. So Tristan, do you ever go back to Indiana to visit your parents? Hudson spoke up, settling into the usual armchair he considered his throne as he surveyed his little kingdom. No, Tristan replied emotionally. Any reason why you wouldn't? Iris whispered. This wasn't something she knew about him, and honestly it startled her. I never knew them, my foster parents. The ones who raised me, yes. I visited them whenever I could when they were still alive. Tristan answered, seeing Iris and her family's shocked expressions. Do you know why they abandoned you? Sarah said in a motherly tone, a hint of anger flashing through her as she thought about any parent abandoning their child. She noticed it saddened Hudson too, though he didn't show it. No, I never cared to know. I figured it would be disrespectful to the ones who raised me when it wasn't their responsibility. Tristan said. He knew the reason. He just didn't want to volunteer that kind of information. Personally, he didn't want anything to do with them when he finally met them at his grandparents' funeral. Their first meeting wasn't one people would write home about. He told them straight that he didn't need them since they chose their nomadic lifestyle over the son they brought into this world. He told them after that day he never wanted to see or interact with them on any level, no matter how superficial. He hadn't heard a peep from them since his grandparents passed away 6 years ago. Can I expect the same loyalty you gave your grandparents when you're with my daughter? Hudson asked with a protective tone and like a father would. Dad, Iris's words were cut short by Tristan's gentle squeeze of her hand. Absolutely, Tristan affirmed confidently. Good, I can respect that, Hudson said, nodding in acceptance as his chin hit his chest. A pleased look was on his face at his daughter's surprise. He never readily accepted any boyfriend or men his daughter brought home. He would eventually warm up to them if his daughter showed any care toward them. Have you ever had Dino ribs? He asked, noticing the bewildered look in Tristan's eyes. I can't say that I have, Tristan admitted. Well, you'll love mine, Hudson said, gesturing for Tristan to follow him. Tristan looked at Iris for clarification. She only shrugged, but he noticed the mirth in her eyes. As he followed Hudson outside through the back door, Tristan noticed the large, numerous smokers seemingly mounted on trailer frames if he had to guess. It wasn't hard to track the sweet, smoky, juicy, savory beef aroma to the smoker in use. I run a barbecue catering business, if you were wondering, Hudson said over his shoulder as he lifted the lid of his 500-gallon smoker. Mesquite smoke coated his face as his seasoned eyes surveyed the bark of the 4 racks of ribs to see if they were ready to wrap. When he was satisfied they had reached that stage, Hudson pulled out the tin pan. He'd poured a few spoonfuls of beef tallow to smoke while the ribs cooked, seeing the amber gloss it had achieved after hours of smoking. Ever wrapped ribs? Follow me, it's pretty straightforward, he said, nodding toward the rolling tray he'd already waited and prepped. Tristan watched first as Hudson ladled the liquid fat onto the paper before his left. Rubber-coated hand spread the fat around the paper before returning to the smoker, opening the smoker with his right hand and pulling one of the racks of ribs out from its bone rack. His heat-resistant glove kept him from getting his base scorched as he placed the first rack onto the paper. Tristan's eyes darted from Hudson's hands to his face as he observed how Hudson wrapped the ribs. Think you can handle it? Hudson asked after he finished wrapping. Sure, but why are you asking me? Surely Maxim would be better at this, Tristan said, taking the gloves from Hudson's outstretched hand. Oh, I know he would be, But if you're going to date my daughter, I need to know if he can handle his meat, Hudson said, challenging Tristan to prove him wrong. How long is this article? Tristan asked, stepping closer to taunt him. 18 inches, Hudson said, smirking, returning to the smoker after grabbing his remaining heat-resistant glove. A knowing smile appeared as he turned back and saw Tristan was ready for him. He didn't say a word as he took the wrapped meat from Tristan when he was done. He didn't think he had to. He figured Tristan was smart enough to understand why he didn't. If not, then he'd be disappointed. Closing the lid for the last time to cook the wrapped ribs for another hour, adding a small piece of wood to keep the temperature at 275 degrees to render the fat. Quite the catering gig, Tristan mused, his voice trailing off as Hudson moved to the nearest smoker. Yeah, I even do Begu catering for the church when they have their annual Begu fair, Hudson said from deep inside the smoker to ensure it was ready for the event happening next month. Oh? Hudson hummed, determined to give his all to the church. If the smell of those ribs is any indication of your Begu catering, then I'd wager your church sells out of tickets pretty fast, Tristan said, stroking his girlfriend's father's ego, receiving a rather sunny smile from Hudson. Just wait, in another hour, you'll be addicted to my Begu, Hudson boasted, patting his stomach in glee. Dad, Iris's voice echoed throughout the backyard as she stepped out the back door of her parents' house. Yes, Hudson replied. Mom wants me, Iris said as her voice drew closer to them. Her eyes studied her father's as they neared each other. She could see her father's approval of her boyfriend, which, as you can imagine, brought joy to her heart, knowing her family accepted Tristan. They didn't say a word as her arms wrapped around Tristan's waist. Pressing her body closer to him, she felt his hand on her back, where she hoped she would feel his hand on her for a long time. I hope my parents weren't bothering you, she whispered as she gazed at him intently. No, they're just being protective of their child like any other parent would be, Tristan said. He wasn't expecting this kiss, nor was he about to complain about it. Good. I want you to get along with everyone, Iris said sweetly. With that, she proceeded to give Tristan a tour of her parents' property, showing him all the places she liked to hide when she and Summer would play when they were younger, where she had her first kiss from a boy when she was 12. There were times in her life she wondered what would have happened between her and Mitchell if he hadn't died in a farming accident a month after their kiss. Around 5 that evening, as Tristan and Iris sat at her parents' dinner table, Tristan eyed the feast Sarah had prepared. Maxim had brought the banana pudding he learned from his mother. Steam rose from the grilled okra in the china dish Sarah's mother gave her on her wedding day. The grilled corn glistened as the butter melted on the kernels as they lay nestled in the shallow dish. The sweetness of the grilled beans permeated the air, inviting them to eat their fill. All eyes, however, were on the sliced dino ribs, now resting as Hudson brought the platter into the room. Tristan wasn't sure if he heard some people's stomachs rumble, or if it was just in his mind as the smoky scent hit his gut. Tristan glanced down at his left hand as he started to reach for the okra. Feeling like a fool as he saw everyone bow their heads, he quickly retracted his hand. He didn't intend to offend them in their own home. However, his eyes couldn't stay off the ribs as he saw the juices dripping from the meat. After they finished their prayer, no one waited another second before the food was passed around, the plates overflowing with delicious, nourishing food. Tristan didn't know everyone was holding their breath waiting for him to take his first bite of the ribs. The moment he eagerly reached back for another bite, the whole table erupted in laughter. Okay, get it? Iris asked with a sly, knowing smile. You better bring home about a pound, Tristan whispered behind his napkin, which only caused Iris's smile to widen as Hudson was close enough to hear Tristan's request. Their meal lasted nearly an hour before their plates were cleared and the banana pudding was brought out. There, Sarah stood ladling scoops of pudding for her family and their guest. You wouldn't mind if I stayed the night tomorrow night, would you? Iris asked in a husky voice as she and Tristan stood outside her parents' porch. No, why would you think I would? Tristan exclaimed, watching her cheeks flush. You forgot something, Hudson said, startling them both, holding out 2 Begu bags, each about half a pound. They'll still be frozen when you get home, he said with a sly grin. He'd slipped in a couple of small cups he used for his catering business filled with his own unique sauce. If you like, Iris can help you with the coleslaw for the sandwiches, Hudson said before turning back inside. See you later, drive safe, call me when you get home, Iris said affectionately as her lips left his for the last time. "Will do," Tristan agreed, watching how flustered Iris was becoming as he playfully looked at her. Mentally telling her this is your moment, chuckling as she playfully punched his arm. He hadn't felt this good in years, pushing thoughts of his past life out of his mind. That stage of his life was over. His mind, however, wasn't at peace as he sat in his car. If so, then why was it hanging over his head like a guillotine waiting to fall? Tristan reluctantly admitted he'd been unrealistic to think he could just will his past to stay in the past while his marriage remained unresolved. Muttering to himself as he started the car, knowing he'd have to return to Maine to finish the nightmare of his marriage. At the first stoplight, he called his lawyer, telling him to file the papers Tristan had made him sit on for years, also telling him he would make her sign them. He needed to make sure she actually signed, and wasn't tricking him to officially end things. 3.5 weeks later, Tristan pulled his thin coat collar higher as he stepped onto Mars Hill's Main Street. While a chill still lingered in the air, signs of spring were visible as the snow began to melt. He noticed a few people glancing back at him as he passed. Not that he knew any of them, but his face had been attached to the town's business scene for so long that he wasn't uncommonly attracting attention. He even got waved at by people he didn't know. He waved back, it would have been rude otherwise. He glanced up at the 5-story building housing his lawyer's firm before heading inside. "Maximus," Tristan greeted, startling his lawyer as he walked into the man's office. "Tristan, don't do that to my old heart," Maximus joked, clutching his chest, mimicking a heart attack. "Dick, you're more likely to have a heart attack than my slight fart could get me to the moon," Tristan retorted, causing the man in his 50s to burst into hearty laughter. "Did you learn that down south?" Maximus asked, a playful smile on his lips. "Nope, that's all me," Tristan replied with a smug look as he settled into the chair in front of Maximus's desk. "Got the papers ready?" he asked, getting down to business. "Of course. Have you heard what's been going on with her?" Maximus asked, making sure his client knew what he was about to face. "No, when I left, I tossed her out of my mind," Tristan stated plainly, feigning ignorance of what had transpired in her life, while in reality he was the architect of their downfall. 3 days after the meeting with Mrs. Marshall, newspapers, tabloids, and the like had a field day with all the information they could verify in such a short time after receiving his package. He'd sat at his desk grinning like the Mad Hatter as he watched all the videos of Omar dodging reporters as they hurled question after question at him. He'd even been kind enough to help the man's wife avoid hiring a private investigator to get the pictures she needed for her own divorce. So, Mark not only had to contend with attacks from rivals, increasingly pressuring questions from reporters, but now he was also dealing with the divorce as he watched televised footage of her slapping Mark silly and kneeling on his groin before throwing newspapers at him. Tristan even winced when his wife was cold towards his soon-to-be ex-wife. "Well, no need to dredge up the past, eh?" Maximus uttered, raising one eyebrow. "I don't know what you mean. There was nothing there to begin with, so there's nothing to dredge up," Tristan said, taking the papers from Maximus as he stood up. He knew what his lawyer was hinting at, if not in a roundabout way, and he was smart enough to not even think about it. He wasn't going to have anything that could tie him to the disaster unfolding around Omar. He didn't care what they thought, he couldn't control that. It was what they could prove in court that worried him, because if he knew the bitch he'd married, he would be the first one they went after. As he stepped out of the elevator cabin, as the elevator reached the ground floor, he pulled out his mobile phone. He frowned as he brought up his wife's number, sighing in annoyance, but he knew this would be over soon. Tristan felt his jaw clench as the phone rang as he reached his car. Then, he heard the click of the connecting line. "What do you want?" Ariel's excited growl echoed. "Meet me at the Rusty Crab in 30 minutes, Tristan commanded. "Tristan, I don't have time for your nonsense." "Bitch, I don't care. If you're sucking Omar's tiny dick, you better get your ass to that restaurant, or I'll show up at your doorstep with all the reporters my lawyer told me are camped out there. How's that?" Tristan asked as he started his rental car. "Fine, Tristan, let's just get this over with." "Good, it's about time you got out of my way," Tristan said coldly before ending the call. Tristan was sitting in a booth waiting for his food, because what he had to do wouldn't take long, nor kill his appetite before he got to the airport to go home. The moment he saw her walk into the restaurant, their separation seemed to have aged her 10 years. He kept the smile he felt hidden. He didn't need her making a fuss. "Tristan," Ariel said evenly, "I take it you have the divorce papers for me. What's the reason for going this far?" Her eyes followed Tristan as he casually pulled out their divorce papers and dropped them in front of her. She knew their marriage had been over for a long time. However, even though Tristan hated her, she still loved him in her own way. She didn't waste a minute opening the papers, grabbing the pen Tristan dropped beside them and signing where his lawyer indicated. "Goodbye, Tristan. I know this isn't how I wanted things to go. I know I'm not doing this because you're lacking in any way. I'm doing this purely for my own entertainment." "I don't care, you can go now. I got what I wanted," Tristan said coldly as he glanced at her as she stood to leave. "Okay, take care of yourself," Tristan, Ariel said, leaving her ex-husband sitting at the table as she walked towards the exit. The finality of it all didn't stop the tears from welling up as she turned her back to him, so he wouldn't see her cry as she ran back to her crumbling life. She knew he had a hand in what was happening with Mark. How he got such information she couldn't fathom. It didn't matter anymore. At that point, they were in survival mode. She'd done everything in her power, using every skill she'd learned to turn this negative press in their favor. However, she was treading water and honestly, she didn't know how long she could keep them afloat, particularly in the polls. When she got home, the reporters were long gone, which she found strange given the heat of their exclusive story. What she didn't know was Mark had fled to the airport, thinking he could escape to Bahrain. Ariel's face showed confusion as her neighbor stepped out of her house as she got out of her car. When she asked why she was in her house, the neighbor told her that the man she was living with had run off after she left. Fear was evident on her face, thinking that the man could leave his own children like that without a care. Her neighbor assured her that her daughters were all right. As for her, it seemed one of the photographers had knocked on her door, informing her that her daughters had been left unsupervised before the man had to jump in his company's truck, so they could catch Mark wherever he was going. Ariel held her two daughters close as they surrounded her. She didn't know how to answer any of the questions they bombarded her with as she ushered them into the house. It was late afternoon when her whole world came crashing down to the point of no return. On the vibrantly colorful TV, on the local and national news, because she was flipping channels like crazy, was footage of the FBI leading Mark, who she knew wasn't one kept him handcuffed at the airport he was trying to fly out of. The remote fell from her hand as the news channel displayed his real name and the crimes associated with him. Her mind went blank as her body lunged for her daughter's room. Her children just stared at her with utter confusion as she threw their clothes into suitcases, where she also quickly packed her things. She knew the vultures were coming. She'd planned on disappearing long before they came. With her two daughters strapped into the back seat, she sped away from her life that no longer had a future. She made a quick stop at the bank. Mark thought she didn't know where he'd set up an account under her name, where he stashed a few million. How he got it, she didn't know, nor did she care. All she cared about at that moment was ensuring her daughters were taken care of. After she changed the PIN on the account, Mark wouldn't be able to withdraw the money before she could set up an offshore account. Ariel and her daughters headed toward the unknown. Tristan breathed a sigh of relief the moment he stepped off the plane. The weight of his crumbling marriage seemed to dissipate with every mile he left behind. As he exited the arrival area, a newscaster's voice from an unheard-of news agency blared from a nearby TV. Most people wouldn't have noticed if they weren't in the airport. Everyone stared at Tristan as he let out a booming laugh at the news that Mark was facing federal charges and extradition to Sweden after serving his sentence. A self-satisfied hum filled the air as he walked across the parking lot to his car. His smile played across the window glass as he unlocked the door. As he waited for the car to warm up a bit, the ping of his phone caught his attention. He paid attention when he saw Iris's text message, which turned out to be a voicemail. His member sprang to attention as her message ended, urging him home quickly as she knew his landing time. The moment he burst into his apartment, she stood there in her naked glory, hands resting on the edge of the kitchen island, eyes hungry for the meal to come. Her fingers beckoned him closer, signaling him to come and taste of his woman. Her breath hitched in her throat as her legs wrapped around his waist, feeling his hands gripping her butt, as she kissed him passionately while Tristan carried her to his bedroom. "Are you big?" A lustful moan escaped her throat as she rubbed her wet peach along Tristan's covered shaft. Hard, her voice low and yearning before her tongue twirled and rolled with his. Men need their heat, pressing her body closer and lifting herself along his body, pulling his face between her breasts. Women deserve sex. Iris asked with a knowing, mischievous grin as she looked into Tristan's eyes as he looked at her. Her cries filled the night air as Tristan wasted no time tasting her nectar. Her silhouette played along the backdrop of the night as she rode her lover into the early morning just to welcome him home. "I love," Iris whispered while squirming, rubbing her cheek against his chest as she felt his light touch along her spine. Tristan hummed as his mind snapped to attention. "It's over, right?" "Yeah, in 2 months I'll be single," Tristan stated, knowing that was what she was thinking about. "Who?" "Oh!" "Yes?" "When it's officially over, will you ever consider seeking that kind of commitment again?" Iris asked timidly, hoping she wasn't scaring him off. "It depends on the person," Tristan mumbled his usual answer, wincing as Iris patted his stomach. "I want a real answer, Tris. Not what you keep telling me till now," Iris retorted, her displeasure as clear as day. "Then I need to know the real question in all of this," Tristan said, looking down at the top of her head from his chest. "I want more, Tris." He felt his morning wood stiffen in his underwear as her breasts pressed against his stomach as she rolled over. "Honey, you know how she hurt me. And you know I'm so tired of her. I have been for years. I've just been waiting for something better to come along," Iris said, giving Tristan a seductive look as she felt his hard shaft pressing against her dance floor. "You know me. You know I'm not like her. You're the only man I want, Tristan." "I know marriage isn't just about the comfort, right?" Tristan said seriously, surprised he was even arguing about it after the nightmare he just went through. But darling," at first she didn't know what to do with how her voice affected him, but now she was taking advantage of it, and she didn't think Tristan minded at all. "We need this," Iris said, feeling his hard shaft throbbing against her mound. "Huh?" Tristan exclaimed, confused. "You know how my parents are, and you know their views on unwed mothers," Iris said shyly while her hands trailed across Tristan's chest. "Now what?" Tristan exclaimed, sitting straight up in bed. "You really only have yourself to blame, Tristan," Iris said with a very amused smile on her lips as she glanced at him. "How many times have I told you to pull out?" "And this is your way of telling me you're pregnant?" Tristan asked, raising an eyebrow. Iris hummed. This was the rest she wanted him to have after his flight home, so she could tell him the truth and give him the time he needed to come to terms with being a father. "This is our baby, Tris," she whispered, placing his hand on her stomach, asserting that it was indeed his and hers, and that she wasn't playing him like his first wife did. Tristan couldn't speak as his eyes flickered from his hand to Iris's face and back again. He knew Iris wasn't anything like Ariel, but his mind couldn't help but wonder if it was truly his. However, the look Iris gave him told him she would never do to him what Ariel did. He saw her going out of her way to let him see that she was telling the truth. "So it's a baby, huh?" Tristan mused as Iris nodded, her eyes shining with happiness as he didn't deny the child growing inside her. "I promise you, Tris, your life with that woman was completely wrong. God knows better than that there was a much better woman for you than her," Iris said, sitting demurely and properly on his lap. Her womanly instincts only wanted to push his hard tool deep inside her paradise where it would always belong. "Oh? Really? Of course Yahweh knows. He knew you before you were born, so he knows what kind of woman you would need," Iris said smugly. "I see, and this isn't a shotgun wedding, right?" "Dad will be behind me with a son, possibly," Iris exclaimed, her hand stroking her chin thoughtfully. "How many people know about the pregnancy?" Tristan asked, wondering if he'd always have a very angry father-in-law to deal with. "Just us, honey," Iris said sweetly. "I wanted to tell the baby's father before anyone else," she said affectionately. "I see, so should I run now or tomorrow?" Tristan asked, and Iris patted his left arm. "Dad won't do anything to me. He and Mom might be disappointed, but they won't hurt me if I take responsibility and don't turn Mom into a respectable woman," Iris said, sniffing the air. "Oh, a respectable woman? Huh? Honey, I thought we were past that." Tristan chuckled as Iris feigned shock at his words. "You hurt me," Iris exclaimed, playing up her act. Her laughter filled the air as Tristan took control, pinning her down on her back. "My Wilkins, what are you going to do to me?" she said innocently. "Everything," Tristan said deeply, seeing the hunger in Iris's eyes and the satisfaction in it as he entered inside her. "Tris." Iris's voice echoed through the bedroom as Tristan stood under the shower head to shower after Iris finished showering. "Yeah, Tristan replied, turning his head towards the bathroom door while shampooing his hair. When you're done getting dressed, we're going to my parents' house, Iris stated practically. Oh, why is that? Tristan asked, not seeing any reason to go there as he didn't want to be scolded by her parents. It's the church bagu, so Dad's firing up all the smokers, so let's get to it, Iris said with a bright smile on her face as she felt Tristan's eyes piercing through the shower curtain. January. No, she shook her finger back and forth, we're getting married? You'll just have to get used to joining me when there's a family event, Iris stated, nodding as if it was the most natural thing. So it's a two-sided obligation to help the in-laws, right? Tristan asked amidst the splashing water on the tiles. Of course, Tristan, your family is my family, just as my family is your family, Iris said, making him feel that she would be around for the long haul. Whenever you want to introduce your new wife to the family, she mused, staring into space. You know I haven't even agreed. His defenses were put on high alert as the shower curtain was pulled aside. You're saying you're going to take care of the woman carrying your child, become a father to the baby growing inside me, and don't you dare stand there staring at me like a fool. I know for sure you've loved me ever since I ate the last of your favorite mini pies. I know one thing you don't understand between a man and his pie, Iris panted, feigning anger to let Tristan know she was just teasing him. Yeah, well, pie is life, like some kind of pie, Tristan said with a mischievous smile, raising an eyebrow to entice her to shower with him. Later, you have to hurry, and I know you'll marry me, Iris said, nodding as if it were all settled before closing the curtain. As they arrived at Hudson and Sarah's home, the smell of smoke hit his nostrils. Tristan noticed Maxim and Summer's big truck, parked in their usual spot as they lived on the other side of the property due to having to drive around the road often. Tristan raised an eyebrow when he thought he saw steam where there shouldn't be anything like that, as there were plenty of trees in the area, not realizing it was Maxim's 30-gallon copper still, where he was currently brewing his own spiced rum. Hey Iris, Tristan, Maxim greeted as he rounded the corner of his mother-in-law's house. Want a drink? He offered, presenting his homemade breakfast beer to Iris, who usually didn't hesitate to have one except for that day. Are you sure? Maxim asked, shrugging as Iris refused again. Do you want to try? He asked, offering the beer to Tristan. What's with that? Tristan asked because he wasn't sure if he should ask or not. That's Maxim's breakfast beer. It's really good. You should have a glass, Iris interjected, urging him. Never had one, Maxim asked while watching Tristan studying the bottle. What's that? Beer, or have you ever seen a bottle like this before? His eyes darted to Iris as she reached out and popped the top. Tristan sniffed the bottle, finding it far more aromatic than most beers he'd consumed in his lifetime. You're hooked on cinnamon, aren't you? Maxim chuckled as Tristan's eyes widened in surprise. Okay, what brand is this? Tristan asked, noticing the sheepish look on Maxim's face. You've never had homebrew? Maxim reached out, placing a hand on Tristan's shoulder, shaking his head at the blasphemy he was witnessing. Tristan, I shall be as the Lord is to me and bestow my wisdom upon you, he declared, wrapping his arm around Tristan's shoulder and leading him towards the backyard. As long as you promise not to throw the bottle away, I'll send you home with 6 cases of the latest batch I just bottled, Maxim grinned, patting Tristan's back before he went to the smokers Hudson had put him in charge of. Tristan, Hudson called out, waving him over to join them. Go on, Iris uttered, a playful tone echoing on her lips as she went to find her mother and sister. Come on, we've got a lot to do, Hudson said, leading Tristan to the smaller smoker. He showed Tristan how to maintain the proper temperature for the Boston butts they were cooking for the church. With 160 shoulders to cook, he knew they'd be there all day. Think you can manage these 2 smokers? I can try, but I've never done anything like this before, Tristan said, stating his limitations. Oh, I know, but I'll be keeping an eye on things, you'll be fine. Now, I gotta check on some butts too, Hudson said, heading towards the 2 500-gallon smokers he was overseeing while Maxim monitored the 2 250-gallon smokers he used for smaller catering jobs. The 2 smokers Tristan was monitoring were from his personal smoker, but they only held a total of 10 butts, while Maxim's 2 held a total of 50 butts, and his 2 held 50 butts each. Hudson estimated that those butts would be enough for approximately 1,200 to 1,400 people, Glancing slightly towards his house as he heard the chopping of wood, he thought Maxim would be ahead of the game in stacking more wood in case they needed it. He didn't expect Tristan to just pick up half of the wood he'd just split back onto the split wood pile he'd moved into the center of the circle. Meanwhile, Iris entered her mother's kitchen through the back door. Summer's voice reached her ears as she and Sarah looked up from preparing some of their side dishes to bring to the church, as did many others. Their welcoming smiles greeted her as she closed the door behind her. "Good morning, sweetheart," Sarah greeted as she pressed graham crackers into the corners of the baking pans that would hold her sweet potato pies. "Help yourself to a mimosa and come join us," she said, nodding towards the mimosa pitcher she'd made 30 minutes prior. "I'm going to have to pass on that," Iris said sadly. She loved a good mimosa, and her mother, in her opinion, made the best ones. However, she should have known that one statement would put her mother and sister on high alert. "Sis, are you okay?" Summer asked, concern lacing her voice because she knew her sister wasn't one to turn down her mother's mimosas. "Yeah, why?" Iris mumbled, feeling her heart threatening to jump out of her throat as her mother looked at her with a knowing look. "Iris, you know better than to come here if you're feeling under the weather," Sarah scolded, wiping her hands clean as she walked around Summer. "You don't feel warm," she said like a mother hen as she placed the back of her hand on her daughter's forehead. "Mom," Iris groaned, trying not to let her face flush and reveal the secret, as her mother was staring her down. "You're hiding something, Iris, I know it," Sarah said, hands on her hips, hoping it wasn't too bad. Not noticing Summer was now fully invested in finding out whatever had her mother concerned, knowing that even if it wasn't bad, she could still tease her sister about it. Iris took a step back as her mother pushed her face into hers. Sarah studied her daughter's face. She only saw that radiant glow on a woman at a certain point in a woman's life. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" What? "No, I'm not," Iris stuttered slyly, looking for an escape from that room. "Don't lie, Iris, you were never good at it," Summer interjected, fanning the flames. "So, you're pregnant?" she asked, trying to hide her excitement for her sister. Although she knew their parents wouldn't be happy with how the baby came to be, they would be supportive of her and their grandchild. "Summer, get your sister. Your dad needs to know about this," Sarah said in the stern voice all mothers used to instill fear in their children, as she turned towards the back door and stepped forward before flinging the door open and yelling for Hudson. "You know what that's about?" Maxim asked as he and Tristan watched Hudson head towards the back door of his house. Worth running away over?" Tristan asked, receiving a curious look from Maxim. "Nah, this is the South, buddy, best to just go, regardless of what you've done," Maxim said before going back to the smokers he was in charge of to check the temperature and fire. Maxim looked back at him as they both heard Hudson's voice echoing through the wall of his house. "Exactly what have you done?" Got his daughter pregnant?" Tristan mumbled truthfully. "Yeah, maybe you do want to run," Maxim exclaimed, laughing at the news. "But congratulations in case they never find you," he said, grinning madly, the grin widening as Tristan saw his escape. "You dirty rat bastard," Hudson seethed as he stood in the open back door of his house. "Make us believe you're a respectable man and not a son of a bitch who defiled my daughter," he yelled, making Tristan fear God. "Dad." Iris's voice cut through before her mother and sister could distract her. "You've got some nerve showing up here knowing what you've done," Hudson declared before advancing towards Tristan. "Then I can sue the people who created that daughter. If you didn't want me to do that, then you shouldn't have created such a beautiful woman," Tristan retorted, stopping Hudson, as no one expected him to say those words. Obviously, Hudson didn't know what to say as he just stood there staring blankly at Tristan. "Damn it, Hudson, if I knew that could get you off my back from years ago, I'd have said something similar," Maxim grumbled, pulling Hudson out of his trance. "You've got some nerve, Maxim, for letting that happen," Hudson said, criticizing his son-in-law. "You better take responsibility for getting my daughter pregnant," he stated sternly. "Of course, it's my child too," Tristan said, stacking the split wood neatly. "I'm nothing like my parents," he whispered just loud enough for no one to hear. "Good, although I don't like how this baby came to be, Sarah, and I expect you to marry her. You know this, right?" Hudson asked, glaring at Tristan. "Dad, you know for a fact you got Mom pregnant with Summer before you two got married. Don't even mention my husband," Iris said, interrupting her dad. Seeing the grin on Maxim's face, knowing he'd gotten the brunt of her parents' fairness too often for his liking. With their conversations over the years, now that the papers are signed, we just have to wait 2 months before he can walk me down the aisle, she said, looking directly at Tristan. Huh? Iris, we're going to have to talk about this rush and you're planning without my consent, Tristan stated firmly. Of course, darling. You know I want what's best for us. I deserve you, Iris said, smiling teasingly at Tristan while blowing a kiss to calm his ruffled feathers. Good luck, Hudson chuckled, going to check on his smokers upon hearing the selfishness his daughter was known for in her early years, that selfishness only resurfacing when she really wanted something. Tris, you know we're meant to be, right? Iris exclaimed as she slid up next to him as he stood under the small tent her father set up for Tristan, as they would have to tend the smokers for hours. So you just force every man you meet to marry you? Tristan teased, watching her cheeks flush. No, only the ones I think are worthy of carrying his child, Iris said, rubbing her cheek against his arm. And why the rush to marry so quickly? Because I want my child to have a married mother and father when it's born. As God said, an excellent wife who can find. She is far more precious than jewels, Iris stated cheerfully. And Tris, I'll be the best wife you've ever had. Your years with that woman will be like a dream as we grow old together. Iris, Sarah yelled, get your butt in here and help your sister while you rest, she said in a mother's overly protective voice. Mom, I'm fine, Iris replied, rolling her eyes. All right, Luana, Sarah practically growled, making Iris's eyes widen as she used her middle name, which her parents only used when they were upset or rebellious. The sun had long since set, as the last embers of the smokers were dying down as Hudson, Maxim, and Tristan worked to bring the 160 fully cooked butts into the house. The side dishes they usually made to help with the church's outing were ready to be transported in the morning as they would shred the pork and pack the meat into trays. When everything was settled, Summer led her husband out the back door to their own house while Iris and Tristan decided to stay the night. Tristan was relegated to the couch in the living room while Iris was locked in her sister's old room with Sarah guarding the hallway to keep Tristan from visiting in the middle of the night. So was her daughter. Although Tristan thought it was old-fashioned, he was still in their home and allowed to stay instead of getting a motel room for the night. So Tristan didn't say much about it. As he woke up the next morning, he saw Iris's face hovering over him with a cup of coffee in hand. A glint sparkled in her eyes as she brought the steaming cup to her lips. Her fingernails scraped along his scalp as she passed over him. Can you two give us a hand before heading back to Jackson? Hudson asked while sprinkling some pepper on his eggs. With what? Tristan asked, hoping it wouldn't take all day as he had other things to do that day before having to go to work the next morning. Transporting all that meat to the church, what else? Hudson said, looking at Tristan as if he were simple-minded. Just haul it, right? Tristan retorted. All right, after you haul the meat, you two can be on your way, Hudson said, knowing he couldn't push Tristan too hard right now. All right, I don't have a problem with that, Tristan said, breaking the yolk of his egg before dipping his toast into the runny yolk. Iris pointed every which way as she guided him towards the church. It wasn't like he would have a problem as Maxim's horn was loud enough for him to follow, even if he couldn't see Maxim's truck. St. Mary Presbyterian Church loomed larger than the houses as Tristan and Iris approached the nearly century-old church. A throng of people were leaving the fellowship hall where the church's kitchen was. They had been unloading from Hudson's truck as Tristan parked next to Maxim. He heard happy chatter as the car doors closed and the tailgate gently opened on its hinges. Tristan looked strangely at Iris and her family as they easily mingled with everyone like this. But then again, he shouldn't be surprised as Iris's family had attended the church for years. As he carried one of the many trays of meat through the back door of the kitchen, he was very surprised, though he should have been, at how organized the kitchen was as the volunteers weighed the meat they would sell in half-pound and pound bags that they wouldn't use for sandwiches. Hudson, the voice of the church pastor boomed from the crowd. I think I smell your signature smoke, the man in his 50s said, embracing Hudson in a manly hug. You know I'd be here, Joe, Hudson said, smiling warmly at his old friend. I know the congregation can always count on you and your family when the church is in need. Sarah, you better have brought some of last year's brownies. Otherwise I fear we might have a full-blown riot, Joe joked, greeting Sarah like an old friend. In a way, they were old friends since the two dated in their senior year of high school. After that, they maintained a friendly relationship. "Well, what's the fun in giving them what they want?" Sarah retorted, making the women, young and old, in the kitchen laugh. Tristan just set the trays down where Iris indicated and went back to the door to bring in the rest. As he brought each tray into the kitchen, Tristan noticed Iris would tuck her hair behind her ear. That warm smile she always had whenever she glanced out of the corner of her eye, as she spoke to the people he assumed she grew up with. He was helping Maxim bring the last trays on another truck, though alone, with a flatbed pulling up. "Whatever you do, don't make a fuss, at least not here," Maxim warned, driving Tristan towards the kitchen. It was like this every year with that truck owner, thinking he was the big man in their small town. But really he was nothing, considering how his father kept the restaurant going. The man boasted about his BBQ as if it were the holy grail, while it was just like every other BQ in the chain. No defining flavor while slathering the meat in sauce. "Huh?" Tristan exclaimed, confused. Maxim only nodded towards the truck as if that meant something to him. "You want to elaborate?" he asked, noticing Maxim's clenched jaw. "I assume he made a move on your wife," Tristan stated, and Maxim only nodded. Not only Summer, he actually had feelings for Iris, and because she lived in another state, he diverted his attention to my wife until I beat him for trying to do it to my wife, Maxim said practically. "Why I said don't start anything, at least inside the church." "I see," Tristan stated coldly. His eyes turned serious as past experiences with a man like him surfaced in his mind. "If he doesn't do anything, then I won't do anything," he said after a few minutes before he and Maxim walked through the back door. "Honey, is everything all right?" Summer asked, coming up to her husband as she noticed Maxim and Tristan's moods. Soon her sister came too, also having a worried look on her face. "Ember Janrich is here," Maxim answered curtly, noticing his wife's pursed lips while Iris wasted no time closing the distance between her and Tristan. "Honey, I know he'll be rude, but please restrain whatever you suspect is about to erupt because of me, okay?" Iris pleaded with Tristan. "I'm not some moody teenager who can't control his emotions. If I could control my anger for 5 years, some little prick won't faze me. Now, if he can't keep his hands off my girl, then we're going to talk, very strongly," Tristan said, watching the blush bloom on her cheeks as she wore a shy expression. "Good," Iris whispered as she tiptoed, placing a sweet kiss on his lips. The man's voice heralded his arrival long before he stepped into the kitchen. A line of boys appeared, at least to Tristan, probably no older than 20 and no younger than 17, as they carried triple-stacked trays, 3 to a person. The young men said nothing as they quickly carried the trays to where the older women were pointing, where other volunteers were taking over for them. Maxim wrapped a protective arm around Summer's shoulders as he pulled her close. His eyes narrowed at Ember as the man stood in the doorway, as if he were the lord of this land. Ember scoffed at Maxim, silently mocking him for having the power to win back his wife with a snap of his fingers if he truly wanted her, but choosing not to. Ember considered Summer a pathetic substitute for his true love, Iris. Shock filled his eyes. No one had told him she'd returned from wherever she'd been with that scoundrel, in his opinion, she was shacking up with. Iris, his anger flared as he saw her clinging to a man he'd never met. "Hello," his voice softened as he approached. "I didn't know you were back. Where's his face?" He looked around for Conrad, knowing he wouldn't tolerate anyone getting close to Iris like that, unless the man was family. But then he thought he knew, or at least knew of, everyone in her family. It was a small town. Everyone knew everyone and everything. "Hi Ember, we broke up," Iris politely stated inside the church. "Oh. So that means you're available?" He looked confused as Iris moved behind the man as he stepped forward. "Listen, I don't know you, and right now I don't want to. But it seems I'm the one who needs to tell you, she's my girlfriend. So keep your advances to yourself," Tristan said. Observing how well the man masked his emotions, his face was as still as a placid lake. "I see long-term relationship?" Ember asked, fishing for information. 18 months, Tristan lied, feeling Summer's glare burn his skin for fibbing on hallowed ground. "Well, I hope you two stay that way." Ember's parting shot before he fell back with his workers as they exited to retrieve the last trays. Ember wasn't religious, it was all for show, a veneer of faith. He wasn't letting Iris slip away this time like he did when she left with Conrad. Tristan's muscles tensed, knowing he hadn't heard the last of that guy. He knew that type. The moment he felt her hand lightly touch his back, he realized how tense he'd been as his body relaxed. "Should I be worried?" Tristan asked from behind her left shoulder. "About Ember?" Iris couldn't help laughing at his absurd question. "Goodness no, I'm all yours and nobody else's," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I don't like you lying in church, but I understand why you did it, so I don't think God will be too mad," Summer said, relieved her sister had a protector. Tristan kept his thoughts on God to himself, regardless of his location. He didn't want to find himself tied up and tossed into the woods where banjo-playing hillbillies roamed. He'd seen Deliverance, and he wasn't going out like that. "Tristan, drive safe, and remember our weekly family dinner next Sunday," Hudson said, shaking Tristan's hand. A tug on his right hand stopped him as Iris claimed his attention. "Please, Tristan," Iris softly said. "You have to remind me," Tristan said, and Iris nodded. Of course, Iris chirped. She was glad he was trying. "Though, I might be glued to my phone," Tristan warned. "Work?" Sarah asked. "No, the Ravens are playing the Steelers," Tristan confessed. "Oh, football fan." Hudson grinned, earning an eye roll from his wife. "Well, no need to be glued to that, then. I don't see a problem with watching the game." "Okay," Tristan said, giving a short nod. "All right, you two get home safe. Iris, text your dad when you get home," Hudson said, bidding his daughter farewell. "Let Mom know about your doctor's appointment. Call if you need her," Sarah whispered in her daughter's ear, feeling Iris nod in response. For 4 months she'd been running. If only she'd known the money in that account was tied to some very shady characters. Ariel slumped against the steering wheel of the beat-up car she'd bought when she stopped at a rest stop during their month-long race to get ahead of the men sent to track down the money. She'd first noticed them in the Oregon town where she and her daughters moved after fleeing Maine and the implosion of her life. The men didn't pay her much attention when she saw them exiting the grocery store she found to be relatively good for sales. It wasn't hard to tell what kind of men they were. They stood out like a sore thumb. So she packed up her daughter's belongings and fled town at midnight. So Ariel stayed in remote places, towns untouched by a visitor in 20 years, hiding places. Pushing herself up and leaning back into the seat, her eyes flickered to the rearview mirror as her daughters slept in the back seats. The phone call she'd received 3 hours ago replayed in her mind. Tears welled in her eyes as her mind rewound her mother's final words before she saw the men use her mother's phone to video call her to execute her mother, despite her begging them not to, telling her it was payment she owed for the inconvenience she caused by running, informing her she had 2 days to return what wasn't hers or her father would be next, followed by her stepmother. She leaned her head to the left, hoping her last hope would hear her final plea for mercy, feeling she would see no more days after returning the money. Wiping tears from her cheeks, sniffing as Tristan's hometown sign stared at her as she started the car. She knew he might hate her and her girls for how they treated him. At least he would see the girls were taken care of even if he wasn't the one to do it. As she drove onto the interstate, she scrolled through her contacts. Ariel didn't know why she kept his number, even though it was over between them. Exhaling as she put the phone to her ear, listening to the phone ring. "Please, Tristan, pick up, please," Ariel pleaded, hoping her ex-husband would answer the phone. Relief washed over her as she heard the line connect. "Why are you calling me?" Tristan's cold question. "Tristan, I know you don't want anything to do with me. I understand I deserve your hatred. But I'm in trouble. I'm not asking you to help me. However, I don't think I can get out of this one, if you know what I mean. I need you to look after the girls. I know you don't want anything to do with them, but you're the only one I can trust with their safety." "Why?" "Because Mark took money from people I didn't even know he was in contact with, and now they want it back. Mark transferred the account where he hid the money under my name. And I think he's hiding it in case he planned to run." Her lips quivered as she knew these would be the last moments she had with her daughters. "They killed my mother," Ariel said, the words hanging on her lips. What are you saying? Are you sure?" "Yes, Tristan, I'm sure. They made me watch it," Ariel said, trying to keep her emotions in check. "Damn it. Yeah," she drawled the word, the sarcasm not lost on her as this was the first time in 5 years Tristan actually spoke to her, not at her. "So listen, you don't have much time. You take the girls to your uncle's house. You know he'll do right by them. I know you don't want to hear this, but I never stopped loving you. I was greedy and wanted it all, and forgot why I chose to marry you, Ariel said, seeing the exit to her uncle's house approaching. Though she only met the man and his wife a couple of times before Tristan found out the truth about their marriage. If this is my last night on Earth, I want you to know how sorry I am for how things turned out. Had I not been greedy, you might not have married me for as long as you did. I hope that eventually you'll forgive me for what I did. She didn't expect him to sigh like that. She knew that sigh meant he was about to do something he didn't like but had to. Okay, I forgive you. Ariel sent silent thanks to the woman she'd overheard earlier because she knew Tristan wouldn't have done that on his own. Thank you, Tris. Please be kind to the girls. They'll need you in the coming years. And I'm sorry for blaming you, but you were the only one I trusted to ensure their long-term safety, Ariel said, hanging up before Tristan could say anything else. Okay, girls, get your things, Ariel said as she unloaded the trunk and handed things to her girls. Mommy, where are we? Isabella asked, looking up at her mother as her younger sister walked to the other side of her mother. My love. Isabella grew anxious hearing her mother's trembling voice. She knew her younger sister, Lucia, was just as scared as she was. Mommy took you to Tristan's uncle's house. Tristan will come to get you. Bad guys are after us, and the only way to fix what we did is to return what your father took from them. Since he's in jail, Mom has to go do that or they will continue to hunt us down. Don't worry, Tristan will be here soon, Ariel said, gently stroking her daughter's cheeks with her thumb. Don't worry, Mommy won't be long, I promise. She lied to her children and herself just to not lose it right there. Ariel sped away from her daughters and the two very confused elderly people as she raced toward her own fate. She prayed, if a sinner like her could pray, that her children wouldn't grieve her too long, and they would be good to Tristan as they grew up. Her headlights blazed in the darkness of the highway as she raced toward Chicago. Tris, it's going to be okay. You're doing the right thing here, Iris sweetly said, her belly protruding from her body as they walked toward her uncle's front door. Even though this was their first time meeting in person, they'd spoken on the phone a few times after Tristan introduced her to the last of what he considered family. His mother, specifically, was fussing over her like she was a porcelain doll. The room they'd designated as the nursery in the house they'd moved into a month ago was overflowing with everything they needed and more. Mostly diapers, though. She thought there was a little too much, but Tristan told her they'd probably need more. She thought it was a bit much, but Tristan told her that they'd probably need more. Yeah, well, I don't understand those kids like you do, Tristan grumbled, feeling Iris pat his arm. Okay, think of it, we'll have little helpers when the baby arrives, Iris said. She'd overheard Tristan's phone call with his ex-wife. She was willing to care for the children until they found a family member to adopt the girls. She wasn't sure how she'd feel about raising two daughters who weren't hers. Let's see about that, Tristan muttered as he raised his hand and knocked on his uncle's door. Tris, his aunt's words caught in her throat as she stared at her nephew, who only nodded at her before entering the house. My Iris, you didn't tell me you'd be this showy, she greeted, kissing Tristan's fiancé because she was at odds with him. They're in there, Tristan, Tom said, glancing at the living room door, where he'd been entertaining the girls since their mother had suddenly dropped them off at his doorstep. Isabella and Lucia clung to each other, silently crying in each other's arms, unsure of what would happen to them. Their heads snapped toward the door at the sound of a man they once knew, hoping he could tell them why their mother left them behind. Their hearts leaped into their throats at the sound of footsteps and a woman's voice they didn't recognize. Their bodies moved before their brains could tell them not to. Tristan only looked down at the children strangely, kids who did nothing but annoy him for the past 5 years, as they clung to him as if he were a lifeline, wondering what they'd been through as he felt them tremble against him. The moment he placed his hands on their shoulders to support them, they only held on tighter. Get your things, we need to catch a flight, Tristan said, looking down at them, and they only nodded sadly. You'll want to see this, Tom said, pulling Tristan aside and handing him a brown envelope. I don't know what they went through or are still going through, but it's certainly big if she transferred parental rights to you, he said, seeing it clearly surprised Tristan. Is this legal? Tristan whispered as he heard Iris introduce herself to the girls. I may just be a contract lawyer, but I don't see anything illegal in the paperwork, Tom replied, watching Tristan realize he was now the legal guardian of Isabella and Lucia. I know that taking care of them isn't what you want to do, considering everything that happened. However, regardless of how the responsibility is given to you, You're their parent now, and you can't just ignore them without facing legal repercussions, he said, placing a hand on Tristan's left shoulder as he looked over the papers. She really is dying, Tristan muttered to himself. He knew Ariel. She might have been a bad wife in person, but she loved her daughters more than anything. So, he knew her transferring her rights to him said one thing: she wasn't coming back. Tris, is something wrong? Iris asked. She had tried to get the girls to smile, but all they did was stare sadly at the floor. He said nothing as he handed her the set of documents he carried as he entered the room before he moved to stand in front of the girls. It seems your mother appointed me as your legal guardian, so you'll be living with me from now on. I expect you to follow my rules, understood? Tristan said in a commanding voice. Yes, Tristan, they replied in unison before Lucia reached out and grabbed his pant leg just to have a bit of solid ground after a month of constantly hopping from bed to bed. Is this real? Iris asked, unsure whether or not to bring them into the house. Uncle says so, Tristan said, looking at her. Figured you wanted a big family, he teased as he ushered the girls out the door and to their rental car. He had purchased round-trip tickets for them as he paid for their flight home. Not right away. Tristan, I want you to put the baby inside me, Iris softly said so the girls couldn't hear. Oh, I can still do it, Tristan said with a wide grin. Then I'll hold you to it, Iris said, nodding decisively. What's going to happen to us, Tristan? Isabella asked, wondering if he'd abandoned them like their biological father had. Once we get to Jackson, where we'll be living, we'll take you to shopping, get you new clothes, beds, and enroll you in school there, Tristan said. While he might not like how they'd been thrust into this situation, he wasn't going to shirk his responsibilities. He didn't want the law on his tail. And she'll be your wife, right? Lucia innocently asked. I am, Iris said, trying to sound brave. This wasn't how she envisioned things unfolding while she and Tristan were preparing to welcome their child. You guys think you can help me take care of my little brothers? She asked, because she wasn't about to abandon the children now that things were finally getting started. As her mother always said, be content with what you have. I can, she glanced at Tristan. I helped Mom look after Abe when she was a kid, Isabella said, taking her sister's hand, praying Tristan didn't send them off to an orphanage. Really? Iris mused, smiling at the 13-year-old as she nodded. All right, Uncle, Aunt, we gotta go now, Tristan said, nodding to them as Iris led the girls out the door. Call if or when you hear anything fishy going on, Tom said worriedly. I just don't want anything she might have a hand in affecting you. Oh, I'll let you know, Tristan replied, waving goodbye to his uncle and aunt as he closed the front door. Oh, this is yours, Tristan? Lucia asked, staring at the house she was standing in front of. Yeah, Tristan answered, opening the trunk as they arrived home from the small airport they'd flown out of. I'll go get their stuff settled. I'll hit Walmart and grab some air mattresses for them. Okay, oh, get me some flips. I'm craving them, Iris warned, Tristan nodding. A slight smile played on her lips, remembering the night she'd roused him from a sound sleep to get her something to snack on when it wasn't in the house. Do you love him, Tris? Isabella asked as she followed Iris down the walkway as Tristan drove away from their driveway. What about you and him? Iris asked, looking down at Isabella, who immediately lowered her head. She pursed her lips, feeling her mother's heart tug as Isabella's bag slipped from her hand before she buried her face in her hands and started to cry. She'd been awake when her mother called Tristan, so she knew the reason for her mother's departure, and who was responsible for her mother's death at such a young age. Her father. My love, it'll be all right. It might not feel like it right away, but the pain will eventually subside, she said, pulling Isabella into a hug. Her hand trailed along Isabella's back as she hugged her, something she didn't think Isabella knew she did, given her current state. Come on, let's get inside before the bugs get us, Iris joked, leading the girls through the front door. Tristan walked in an hour later, plastic bags swinging. He found Iris and the girls sitting on the couch in the living room. Iris's fingers trailed through their hair as they both slept leaning against her. He quietly placed her flips on the kitchen counter before turning on his heel and heading upstairs. He knew that if he and Iris had more children, they might have to remodel some of the rooms to become bedrooms, instead of the formal rooms they were over 100 years ago. Tristan laid some sheets on the air mattresses after he'd inflated both of them and pulled out 2 blankets for them to use at night. He'd called his executive assistant on the way to Walmart, stating he'd be out of the office for a few days and working from home. He was leaving the room when he saw Iris showing them the nursery. He didn't even hear them go upstairs. "Are their beds ready, honey?" Iris softly asked, watching the way they pulled away from her and clung to Tristan. She could see how difficult this was for Tristan, considering what he'd told her about them. "All right, you two, lights out," Tristan said, standing by the light switch. "Tristan," Lucia spoke up while sitting cross-legged on the mattress. "We're sorry for everything we said and did. We know that no words can take back everything we did, but I know that even if you're not our biological father, you're better than my biological father was before he found out," Lucia honestly said. "Yeah, well, I'm a decent human being and not a criminal, but it's nice to know that you two can actually behave yourselves. Now, if you want to move in with your relatives, let me know and I'll contact them. Otherwise, you know my rules. If you live by them, then you'll be taken care of, I assure you. If you two want to make amends, you have to work for it. It's not given. It has to be earned." "Good night," Tristan said, turning off the lights and softly closing the door. "Honey, I know we'll have to rely on them for help, right?" Iris said as soon as Tristan walked into their bedroom. "Isabella knows why her mother left them," she said, stating the truth, seeing it actually stopped him. She saw his mind working, wondering what was going on behind those eyes. A smirk played on her lips. She knew there was a soft heart underneath that scar of his. Tristan walked down the hallway. He should have seen that coming, considering how Isabella acted. Lucia rolled over as he entered the room while Isabella kept her back turned to him. She propped herself up on her arms, watching Tristan circle her bed and go straight to Isabella. Tristan knelt beside Isabella's bed, his fingers trailed through her hair, seeing her eyes staring at him in the darkness. "I'm sorry about your mother," Tristan whispered, causing Isabella's arm to swing out and wrap around his neck. Her hot tears soaked into his shirt as she cried out her pain. After Isabella cried herself out, he wiped her face one last time and went to sleep. On the other hand, Ariel was roughly shoved into a chair. She had willingly handed over her bag upon arrival at the location she'd been told to go to. Her eyes flickered to her left as one of the man's henchmen dropped the contents of her purse onto the table and snatched her wallet off the table. "Give her to me," the man said, his eyes stern. Strands of gray hair covered the side of his slick back hair. "Give me the access, and you can leave. As long as my money is there, you're nothing to me," he said disdainfully. Ariel produced her ATM card with trembling hands. "You have to know that I didn't know it was your money. I just thought it was Mark's money that he was hiding," she said, pleading her case. The man said nothing as he took the card from her hand and handed it to the woman whom she believed was around the same age as the man. "See, that's all there is to it," he commanded after Ariel gave him the PIN number. "Make sure she isn't bothered in this filthy country." His thick Eastern European accent hung in the air. Ariel could feel the knife digging deeper into her back as each minute passed, and she waited for whatever was about to happen. She could swear she aged 10 years in the 10 minutes she sat there, as the man just glared at her. She didn't know what language the man was speaking when he answered the phone. "I understand, take it all then, we'll find the rest," the man said before ending the call. "Dispose of her, make sure to find her ID," he said, rising from his seat. Ariel had accepted her fate, thinking this was punishment for falling for that man and hurting Tristan so much because of her selfishness. Though she might have accepted her death the moment the garrote wire bit into her neck, that didn't mean her body didn't fight to save itself. Her legs thrashed as she clawed at her throat to get her fingers underneath the wire before she heard a snap and nothing else. "Tristan?" an old, weary voice said on the other end of the line as Tristan sat in his office reviewing reports. "Yes?" They found her. At first, Tristan wondered who it was because he'd never saved his ex-wife's father's number. "Where?" Tristan asked, seeing Iris turn in her chair, looking at him through the window. Ever since the girls came to live with them, Iris had become very serious about her role as a mother, and in return, the girls began to overcome the grief of their mother's death. He even helped Isabella find out the federal prison Mark was taken to so Isabella could write him a letter where she disowned her father for getting her mother killed, stating she never wanted to hear or see him again. Lucia did the same when Isabella told her a more sanitized version of the truth. "Just outside Chicago, I'll bring her home with me. You'll be taking the girls to the funeral, right?" Recalling his conversation with his ex-father-in-law when Isabella handed him the phone, Tristan had told him he was fine with taking care of them if that's what they wanted. Otherwise, he'd make sure they found wherever they wanted to go safely. However, that hadn't happened because Ariel didn't have siblings. The man's only brother had passed away in the late 80s due to a car accident, and he didn't have the strength to take care of two emotionally fragile teenagers. Even so, he had informed Tristan that he would be sending a sum of money each month to help cover their expenses of raising them. "Okay, just let me know when, and we'll be there," Tristan replied, getting a supportive nod from Iris. "Thank you, Tristan. I know you don't have to do this for them. I'm glad they have you." "Honey, I'm going out to pick up the kids. Don't stay up too late tonight. Remember, my parents are coming for dinner," Iris said as she slung her purse over her shoulder. "Okay. Be careful. Let them know if you think they can handle it," Tristan said, sending an air kiss to Iris, who returned it. "Always, honey. I'll never let anything happen to our children," Iris sweetly said to her belly before leaving Tristan alone with his thoughts. It was past 6 in the evening when Tristan walked into the house that evening. Memories of when they were 5 and 3 flooded back as Isabella and Lucia ran toward him. He was slightly speechless as they hugged him tightly. Iris just stood there with a beaming smile on her face as if they'd been a family for years. "Dinner will be ready soon," Iris said before returning to the kitchen. She knew the girls needed Tristan right now more than they needed him. She really needed to kiss his lips for giving her the gift that was growing inside her. And so, Tristan just stood there for a few minutes as the girls held on to him, as if their lives depended on it before they let go. Even then, they didn't stray too far from him throughout the night. Not that she minded. She was rather glad that they were becoming closer. Repairing what they damaged, she knew Tristan didn't believe what they were doing, something she couldn't blame him for. She didn't know anyone, male or female, who could handle raising children, not their own, when their partner lied to them, making them believe they were theirs. Iris was determined to never put Tristan in the same situation his late ex-wife had once done. "What smells so good?" Tristan asked as he walked into the kitchen with the girls trailing closely behind. Looking down as Lucia held his hand, his eyes flickered to his right as Isabella moved around the island and climbed onto the bar stool nestled under the overhang of the bar. "Oh, you know that pork belly Dad gave me," Iris said with a knowing smile as his eyes widened at her statement. "You mean the thing that looks like an uncut slab of bacon?" Tristan asked for clarification because he didn't know what those cuts were, only the ones he bought from the store. Besides, Isabella and Lucia were just as confused as he was at the name of that cut of meat. "Exactly," Iris nodded. "You mean you made this up?" Tristan asked, trying not to let his lips make a sound. "I did," Iris said slyly, her mischief evident in her eyes as she opened the oven door. The smell of smoke liquid because she didn't know how to smoke meats like her father. The homemade sauce she learned from her father went very well with the pork, and bacon filled the kitchen. She immediately saw Tristan trying to hold back his saliva, but not his rumbling stomach. Isabella, get the tossed salad from the fridge. Abe, she liked the girl's name, but Lucia preferred her nickname more. Get our plates and set the table. And you, honey, come here and kiss your wife, she commanded, and the girls quickly did as they were asked. Wife? Was I drunk, sleeping, high when we exchanged our wedding vows? Tristan jokingly said, but he couldn't refuse the sweet taste from her lips. Yeah, we drugged you, tied you up, and Maxim answered for you, Iris teased, grinning at him as her hands placed themselves on his chest. Now, you help the girls set the table while I plate the greens and the meat. Okay, honey, Tristan said, kissing the top of Iris's head, feeling her warm skin under his touch. Iris couldn't help but smile as she listened to the three of them converse. Tristan asked about their day at their new school, if they made friends, how their teachers treated them. However, all fell silent. When the house line rang, she asked Tristan to answer, as the phone line didn't need electricity to work in case of power outages. Leaning back, listening to Isabella answer the phone without asking, he glanced up and down to avoid getting burned as she plated the greens onto the plates her mother bought her as a housewarming gift. She saw the confused look on his face when Isabella called him. She knew anyone who knew Tristan usually contacted him through his cell phone, and few knew their landline. Hello? Tristan said into the receiver of the rotary phone. Hello, Tristan, how are you? Tristan's face softened as Sarah's voice came through on the other end. I'm fine, just got home from work. Do you need to talk to Iris? Tristan asked as he heard the clanging of metal in the kitchen. No, it's you. I need to talk to. Okay, then what? Tristan blurted out, feeling rather odd about where this was going. Hudson and a friend of his are going hunting in the mountains. And I was wondering if you'd mind if I stayed with you two for a few nights, since Maxim and Summer are on their way." "Oh, okay, we're about to sit down for dinner. What time will you be over?" "Really? We're almost there, about 5 more minutes." Tristan could only chuckle, but then that was just something he'd grown accustomed to as he hung up. "Honey, who was it?" Iris asked, holding the plate of diced pork belly while Isabella placed the plate of greens onto the table. Her mother asked if she could stay for a few days while her father went hunting, Tristan informed her. "And?" Iris's question rang out after Tristan entered the kitchen as he grabbed himself and Hudson a beer because he didn't think Hudson would drive at night, only to drive east for a few hours. "They'll be here soon," Tristan said, smiling at her. He knew how close they were, and they were making up for the years Iris was up north, and he was definitely looking forward to the kiss she'd give him. "Thank you. Mom would be lonely when Dad goes hunting," Iris said, glad Tristan adapted to how her parents only liked to visit when they weren't busy. "So I'll put these in the oven to keep warm while we wait." A glint appeared in her eyes as she heard a knock on the front door. This was something she missed greatly living up in Maine. "Mom!" she exclaimed as she threw the door open and hugged her mother before greeting her father. "Good evening, Tristan. I really appreciate you letting Sarah stay while I'm gone," Hudson said, noting the girls just stood out of the way, trying to be invisible. "Good evening, Isabella, Lucia," he greeted the teenagers as Tristan and Iris went to retrieve the remaining food. "Hello," they said in unison. "I heard you two are helping Iris plan her wedding," Sarah said, trying to offer support amidst their grief. "Mind if an old lady lends a hand?" she asked, smiling warmly at them. "Sure," Isabella replied, forcing a polite tone. Since Tristan had taken them in, he'd helped her cope with her parents' loss, even though she knew he didn't really want to. "Dinner's ready, everyone," Iris announced. Tristan groaned, leaning back in his chair as a bite of melting pork disappeared. His fingers lingered on the edge of the table as he savored it. He knew he'd get old and fat if he wasn't careful. Iris's victorious smirk and quiet satisfaction as she bit into some greens needed no explanation. "Try these, Isabella, if they're too bitter. Mom can get you some vinegar," Iris said, motherly, aware of her mother's watchful gaze. She knew this, though tough, would prepare her for motherhood. Besides, she couldn't just turn the girls away when they had nowhere to go. "Why don't you add some bacon fat to make them tastier?" she added, ignoring her father's enthusiastic agreement about the back fat. She knew it was his favorite with greens. She noticed Isabella slyly glancing at Tristan as he took a bite of his own greens. With a proud little pat on her back, she tried one. "Vinegar. Just a tiny splash," Iris instructed, showing Isabella the precise amount without overdoing it. After dinner, Tristan helped with homework at their request, a nightly routine Iris was starting to notice. Iris's face was reflected in the bubbly panes of the French-style solarium. The living room lights shone through the colored glass surrounding the bubbled panes. "How are they doing?" Sarah whispered behind her daughter as they watched Tristan helping the girls with their homework. "The best anyone could be doing after losing everyone they care about," Iris said. She would make sure Isabella grew from this experience and didn't let the past define her. "We're getting them into therapy twice a week to help them work through the pain and abandonment they feel. I hope that helps." "I know it will. I've been praying for them," Sarah whispered, stroking her daughter's back. "I'm proud of you for stepping up like this, and Tristan too. I know their history. It speaks volumes about the kind of man he is to take them in when he had no reason other than being a good person, considering what he said about his ex-wife's siblings." "Thanks, Mom. I know he's still angry about what they did in the past. But I know Tristan is doing this as a lesson for our son. Even if he didn't know it at the time," Iris praised, relieved he'd kept his anger in check. A week later, Tristan stood by his ex-wife's grave as Ariel's coffin was lowered. He put his arms around Lucia and Isabella, holding them tight as they wept as the gray metal box descended. Iris decided to stay in Jackson as she couldn't fly in her late stages of pregnancy, and couldn't drive and/or sit in a car for long hours. His thumbs gently rubbed their shoulders as he remained silent as his past sunk into that dark abyss. While he never wanted her dead, he hoped she didn't suffer too much. He could hate her guts, but that didn't mean he wanted the woman tortured to death. Soon, only he, the girls, and his ex's immediate family remained by Ariel's grave. "Tristan, why don't you and the girls stop by the apartment before heading home?" Zane said as his wife tried to comfort him. "Sure," Tristan replied, looking down at the girls, knowing they could use the visit. While their sobs had subsided, their tears hadn't. "I'll follow," he said, knowing Zane and the girls had arrived in a limousine, about to take them back to Zane's home in Red Bay, Florida, only to find the girls gripping his arms tighter as he said so. "See, can't we come with you?" Isabella asked, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. Unseen was the silent shock in Zane's eyes. He knew the real reason why Tristan wasn't overly emotional about his daughter's death, not that he blamed the man. He too, regardless of whether she was his daughter or not, would be as angry as Tristan. Thus, he wasn't too resentful about the interactions he had with Tristan as they made arrangements a few days before the funeral, because Tristan couldn't or wouldn't attend the funeral. "You can, but you don't want to ride in a limousine, do you?" Tristan asked, nodding towards the car, but only receiving a shake of the head from both Isabella and Lucia. "We'll see you there," Zane said before leading his wife to the limousine. Tristan was sipping the remaining drink from lunch before he and the girls headed to the airport to go home. His brown eyes followed Lucia as she wandered around the backyard while Isabella and her stepmother talked on the porch where they'd been since finishing lunch. "Tristan, I know this is insignificant, but I'll help as much as I can because I know those girls aren't your responsibility. I'm just ashamed of how my other kids turned out," Zane sadly exclaimed. He wondered where he'd failed them if they could disown their nieces when they needed a home. His son, he understood, no matter how much he tried to help his son, he still couldn't give up his drug habit. Conversely, his daughter was more stable. It seemed their mother had poisoned their minds just like she did to Ariel. "Keep it, Zane. Like I said when I told you what was going on, I don't need the money. But if you want to help, you can use whatever amount for their college or whatever they want to do when they turn 18, Tristan said, seeing the respect in the man's eyes as he nodded in agreement. "I can do that," Zane declared. He had some assets he'd kept back knowing his children, except Ariel, wouldn't need them with the choices they'd made. He hoped that under Tristan's guidance, Isabella and Lucia wouldn't turn out like their mother or his other children. 2 months later, Isabella fussed over Iris, helping her as much as possible as Iris applied her makeup, while Lucia went with Sarah to ensure the fellowship hall where the reception would be held was ready after their vows. Isabella and Lucia had been making amends since moving in with Tristan. While it was a long road to mend, the change was noticeable a week after they arrived. Iris had helped Tristan escape the anger she knew he still harbored, looking at his face. One thing she was glad about was that it hadn't touched his face since they'd arrived in Tennessee. "Isabella." Iris's voice softened to a motherly tone as she applied eyeshadow. "Yes?" Isabella said, turning to look at her as she straightened up to get something to do. "After today, we'll officially be a family, and I know this might be too soon for you and Abe, but if you two want to call me Mom, you can. I know I can never be your mother, not in that sense, but know that I'm always here for both of you no matter what happens," Iris said, gently turning in her chair to face Isabella as she handed Isabella the completed and legalized adoption papers. She didn't say a word as she watched Isabella turn away from her. She could only assume Isabella was wiping away tears, looking at the way her hand was moving. Isabella didn't speak but gave a weak nod in response. She lifted her head as the bells started chiming, signaling the 5-minute warning. "We need to get ready," she excitedly said as she stood from her chair, her father choosing that moment to walk in. "Good, we should head to the front of the church," Hudson said, noting his daughter looked stunning in her dress, as well as Isabella, he told Isabella, who blushed at the compliment. Since Tristan had taken them in, he and Sarah had tried to make them feel as if they were part of their family. Canon and Dee began to play. Tristan turned as the inner doors of the church opened, and the introduction to the song began. The corners of his lips lifted as Lucia walked down the aisle, holding the pillow containing both of their wedding rings. One of his 5-year-old nieces was Iris's flower girl as her tiny hands tossed the petals in front of her. As she reached the end of the aisle, her mother gently pulled her out of the way and placed the flower basket under the pew where she and her family were sitting. His smile only widened as Iris appeared at the doorway, her arm linked through her father's as they took their first steps. He could see Iris's sparkling eyes through her veil as they got closer. He reached out to her as they neared him, nodding assuredly as Hudson looked at him with an unspoken look to say not to hurt his baby girl. The wedding went smoothly. He noticed Isabella and Lucia had cried a few times throughout the ceremony. As they retreated to the fellowship hall and after the cutting of the cake and toasts, it was time for the first dance, and the one they did the best they could, as she was now 8 months pregnant. Afterward, Tristan took Isabella and Lucia to the dance floor as his and Iris's dance ended. Tristan didn't have a hard time seeing the happiness on their faces as he guided them around. After the festivities ended, the cleanup commenced and vehicles were loaded before they left the church grounds, with the pastor handing them their marriage license. Tristan focused on his wife and making sure she was comfortable, as their child was due in a few weeks. Tristan noted how quickly Isabella took Iris's hand as they got out of the car, and how Iris only smiled like a mother as she did so. A week after the wedding, Iris went into labor at his desk as Trent was trying to negotiate a deal that his assistant director had failed at. True, they were only in charge of the region's technology division, but that didn't stop them from stepping in when their marketing division needed support, as they knew the documentation for their work. However, the moment he heard Iris's pained cry, nothing else mattered. All that mattered was getting his wife to the hospital. It worked in the deal's favor, as the man on the other end heard Iris's cries as clearly as Tristan did. With the help of one of his workers, he got Iris into his car. There was no way he was waiting for an ambulance when the hospital was only 10 minutes away from his office. While driving, he called his father-in-law to let him know Iris's water had broken, nodding into the phone as Hudson told him they were on their way. Summer and Maxim were still on the West Coast for deliveries. However, he still called Summer, knowing it was time she took a break while Maxim drove. "Tris, what's wrong?" Summer asked, using the nickname Tristan often used when the boy became a member of the family. "The baby's on the way, I just wanted to let you know," Tristan said as he paced the waiting room before they came to pick him up. There was no way he was missing his child's birth. "What?" Summer yelled in delight. "Summer, what's going on?" Tristan heard Maxim's voice in the background. "The baby's coming." "Really?" Tris, we'll get there as soon as we can, maybe a day or two." "I don't worry about rushing home, you too. Just get here safely, otherwise Iris will kill me," Tristan joked. With that said, they ended the call. Looking down at his phone, he knew the girls also wanted to be there, but they needed to stay in school. Besides, he wasn't about to leave his wife's side, not now. Yet, even with sweat beading her forehead, the pain etched on her face, she still found the time to tell him to get his butt up and get the girls. An hour later, running feet echoed on the tile floor as Lucia and Isabella ran down the hall after they got off the elevator. Their hair flew behind them as they hurried toward Iris's hospital room while waiting for her to dilate. As soon as they entered the room, they saw the genuine happiness spread across Iris's face before they ran to her side. As time passed, all three tried not to let Iris notice the pain of the contractions as they got closer to everyone. It was 2 a.m. when Ezekiel Samuel Wilkins was born. After the nurses cleaned their child, the little wrinkled hands moved across her face as he yawned in his mother's arms as his father stood beside her. As the years went by, Lucia and Isabella grew up, made friends and broke a few hearts, as well as having their own hearts broken. During those years, Iris had 2 more sons and a daughter who was the spitting image of her mother. However, to support his growing family, Tristan continuously received promotions until he was 50 and became the Southeastern Regional Director. Tristan had requested this so that he and Iris could retire near her parents as his uncle and aunt had passed away 15 years ago. So he no longer had a reason to return to Indiana. Isabella and Lucia, long since having their own families, who remained in Jackson with the thought that someday their parents would return home, helped the two find a beautiful home to settle into, where the two rarely, if ever, left the state unless it was to visit Hudson and Sarah,